Doctors expose the shocking signs that somebody is totally faking it. My ICU attending has a great story about caring for a stroke patient during his fellowship. The stroke patient was a frequent flyer, and despite everyone knowing she was faking her paralysis, she still received care. Until one day, when he was really fatigued, he was told by a nurse that this patient was being rude and refusing therapy. So he walked into the patient's room and said, "Miss Blank, this is absurd. I know you're faking your paralysis, everyone knows you're faking, and we're all sick of this." And he left. And wouldn't you know it, the patient walked out AMA. To clarify, AMA is against medical advice. And to address the people who asked if her leaving is even considered against medical advice if she wasn't paralyzed, the answer is yes. She was admitted to the hospital under the care of physicians and left without being properly discharged, which, strictly speaking, is AMA. I'm a paramedic. Tons of calls to the jail for inmates with seizures. I just lift their arms over their face and let it go. They'll move it to prevent hitting their face, or I'll lightly brush their eyelashes and they'll twitch to it. Dude, I worked at the jail as a detention officer. We really hate having to call you guys when we know that people are faking because we do the same things. But the nurse oftentimes doesn't want to take any flack and just makes the call anyway. Sorry for wasting your time. If someone's unconscious, make a fist and rub your knuckles against their sternum, their chest bone. Put some pressure behind it and rub it quickly up and down, up towards the chin, down towards the belly. It's called a sternal rub and it's incredibly painful, but it won't harm the person in any way. It's very, very hard to completely ignore and continue with the ruse of faking being unconscious. The only more surefire thing is asking your partner to hand you the eye needle to take some ocular fluid while they're passed out, so they won't feel the pain of the needle in their eye. Okay, update guys, there's no actual ocular needle, at least not on an ambulance. We say that because not everybody knows it, and it's a horrifying thing to hear if you're faking being unconscious. We get a lot of miraculous recoveries that way. Okay, update 2. Apparently the sternal rub isn't common practice anymore because people literally went too hard. Sorry. Also, I feel old as F now. My stepmom was passed out once and totally unresponsive, so we had to call an ambulance. I don't think she was faking, but when the EMT did a sternum press, she literally came back to life like Frankenstein. She was like, "Ah!" and took a deep breath. It was honestly so crazy. I was 19 and I'd never seen anything like it. I think you can be truly passed out and come to because of the pain. If it's as painful as people are making it out to be, then I guess so. Also, while it might seem cruel that people are intimidating or torturing their patients to find out if they're for real, it just sucks that enough people are trying to waste everyone's time and money to make this necessary. A nurse thought I was faking that I couldn't swallow when I woke up from jaw surgery. When I came out of the surgery and was panicking, telling them I couldn't swallow my own saliva, the nurse just told me, "Yes, you can. This surgery wouldn't have anything to do with your ability to swallow." I could also barely speak and started crying and pleading with her to believe me. I ended up having cranial nerve damage that paralyzed half of my tongue, trachea, esophagus, and vocal cords. It took 8 months to heal. I drank thickened water, which is as gross as it sounds, for 8 months. Having a healthcare professional not believe you during trauma is absolutely scarring. The nurse was the only one who didn't believe me, by the way. My surgeon absolutely did. It was scary, though, because he actually looked frightened when he finally came in to examine me, like he had never seen this before. You can be faking being alright, too. I had a tooth kicked out, mouth filled with blood and was swelling. I'd stuck a tissue in there to try to stop the blood. I was presented to the triage at the dental hospital. I'm dribbling blood as I talk. She asks me if it hurts, and I said, "A little bit." She looked at me dead in the eye and said, "One of the many things we triage on is pain." Gotcha. Good nurse. I changed tack to, "It hurts like a mother fricker. I've literally been kicked in the face." Thanks for that. Notes were taken and I was patched up and out of there within an hour. If someone's truly unconscious, their thumb always wiggles. Just say that out loud to yourself near the patient. That's like when I hear moms say, "I always know when you're lying because your ears turn red when you lie." The kids then begin to cover up their ears whenever they lie. Nurse here, I had a teenager take too much Zoloft and start having strange seizure-like episodes. What made them particularly strange is that they all followed a predictable pattern of onset. First, he'd lower the bed, next he'd turn the TV volume down, and finally he'd check to see if I was nearby. There was pretty severe thrashing about without any abnormalities in breathing, heart rate, pupils, and he was still able to communicate with me throughout the entire episode. Unsurprisingly, EEG also failed to show any abnormalities. I'm a therapist, not a doctor. For some reason, adolescents like faking DID, also formerly known as multiple personality disorder. It's a pretty rare and debated diagnosis in our field. I've seen people fake it by mimicking how it's portrayed in movies and on TV. Red flags are them telling you, I have multiple personality disorder, and of course not meeting the actual diagnostic criteria. Some people feel like the common diagnoses aren't big or special enough to accurately represent their struggles, so they cosplay something worse. Whatever you're working through is a big deal to us. If you feel like you have to fake or exaggerate your symptoms for your therapist, consider finding a different therapist. If you don't feel like you can be authentic with your therapist, continue searching until you find a therapist you feel comfortable with. Sometimes it's just not a good fit. It happens. You're not obligated to continue seeing a therapist you don't feel comfortable with. If you feel like you need to fake or exaggerate something to be taken seriously by a therapist, it's not a good fit. Continue searching until you find someone who takes you seriously. Also, I'm not a solid resource for DID information. It's not a common diagnosis, and my experience with it has been extremely limited. Stick to peer-reviewed information and experts in the field for the most accurate and up-to-date information. I once had a nurse tell me something that stuck with me ever since. I had a gallbladder attack when I was younger, and let me tell you, that's some of the worst pain I've ever felt. I was doubled over, throwing up bile and unable to move. My mum took me to the ER at 1 a.m. in the middle of a snowstorm. As the nurse was doing my initial evaluation, she asked me the standard, on a scale of 1 to 10, pain question. I thought about it for a couple of seconds and told her, 7-8. It hurts really bad. She nodded knowingly and told me, got it, it hurts really bad. Most people who tell me a 10 are lying. Nobody ever feels a 10. In hindsight, I'm not sure that's the best practice for a nurse. Still, after seeing med-seeking patients myself, I do understand her frustration. They ended up giving me morphine, which brought that number down quite a bit. I want to clarify for mine, or rather the nurse's comment, people can definitely feel a 10 on the pain scale, and I don't want to invalidate your experience if you felt that. I think the point is that if you do feel a 10, the medical providers will probably know without having to ask. Conversely, if an otherwise lucid and calm patient replies with 10, they might not be telling the truth. My sister's a pediatric audiologist, and this is one of my favorite stories of hers. Apparently, sometime in elementary school, usually the early grades, a ton of kids like to fake hearing loss. Like not just, oh, I can't hear the teacher, full on wanting to get hearing aids and stuff. Anyway, she explained to me that based on the way she plays the tones, you can usually tell if someone's faking, especially when they just pretend they can't hear anything. But it's not 100%, obviously, because hearing loss patterns can be really weird. However, she's caught a number of kids simply by saying, okay, so I'm going to play a random number of tones, and they'll go in both ears. I want you to say yes if you hear it and no if you don't. I have the reverse. My back went out, extreme sciatica pain, like being struck by lightning constantly. I couldn't move for days. When someone found me 3 days later, they called 911, just for the doctor to tell me I was faking it for pain meds. While I was crying in pain, I asked him why I'd lay in a pile of my own pee and poo for 3 days for some Vicodin when I literally own a bar. Fricking insane. My favorite thing about these answers is that half of the "here's how you know they're faking" comments get responses that are all like, yeah, about that. Let me tell you how that assumption screwed me over and I almost died. I'm not a physician, but a paramedic. Honestly, I don't really care if you're faking as long as it's halfway believable. I'm still going to treat you as the worst-case scenario. Faking a seizure? You'll get a full set of vitals, a blood sugar, and a shot of benzos. There's lots of different kinds of seizures. If you call 911 because you're in extreme pain and want an ambulance ride, I'll put the good stuff in your vein hole. I'd rather give 100 addicts a 100 milligram dose of fentanyl than withhold it for the one person that really needs it. Can I tell if someone's faking? Yeah, most times, but it goes both ways. If you go too hard, I might assume you have a legit life-threatening injury and sedate, paralyze, and intubate you. Or start IVs in your jugular or shin bone. Fake it if you want, but traction may vary. Yeah, well, there's some evidence in the preceding comments to yours that show how badly people can suffer if a specialist just assumes you're faking off the bat. Although maybe you can't just hand it out to everyone else, we have some compelling arguments as to why you might want to at least consult one of your colleagues if you think someone's faking. Whenever the symptoms aren't there when the patient doesn't know they're being watched. I had someone fake a stroke recently, and I walked in on her walking around the room independently, after pretending to limp on her left side and letting us take complete care of her and wipe her butt for her. It was wild, let me tell you. Why would anyone fake any of this stuff, but especially a stroke? Like, what's the point? Okay, the number of responses is crazy. Here's a synopsis. Munchausen syndrome or factitious disorder, attention or sympathy seekers, loneliness, homeless people wanting a warm bed, getting out of jail or schoolwork or malingering, insurance fraud or welfare fraud, disability money, they don't want to work, narcissistic personality disorder, to get meds, amplified musculoskeletal pain syndrome, general mental illness, being weirdly into people looking after you this way, hypochondria, and the one person who wrote in to say, "Women will do anything to get out of working." Ugh. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I'm a nurse on a floor that deals with a lot of chronic and acute pain patients. Most recent instance was this lady from a few weeks ago that was apparently splitting the oxycodone we were giving her in half in her mouth, and then when the nurses' backs were turned, she had stuffed it in a pill jar. A night nurse caught her in the act and all of her stuff had to be searched. We found 20 half tablets of oxycodone she had been stashing. She told us she was saving them for her family in case they need them, because it's just so hard to get an oxycodone prescription these days. I had her a few days after that and she was having some abdominal pain. The stat x-ray showed only gas, she just really needed to toot. But she was screaming, claiming it was a 10, and making a huge frickin' scene. She demanded Dilaudid through her IV, and she wanted it to be pushed fast. Huge red flag right there. She wanted the high, not the relief. The doc straight up said he wouldn't give her Dilaudid because she was already on so many opiates. She then demanded lorazepam, still through her IV of course. The doctor was like, fine, whatever, just one time and only a low-end dose. I was flushing her IV with normal saline first to make sure her IV was patent, and she leans back and is like, oh yeah, that's so much better already. I hadn't even given her the lorazepam yet. Doctors often think my family is faking. For an unknown reason, when there's something wrong with our organs, our white blood cell count doesn't go up. My younger sister got appendicitis when she was in her early teens. Crying from the pain, but the blood work showed nothing was amiss. If it hadn't been for other tests and my dad's insistence upon them, she might not have been treated in time. So they open her up and, surprise, a gross appendix that was close to bursting. My dad insisted because of an operation he had just had to remove his gallbladder. He was in so much pain that he'd been throwing up and could hardly walk. It had been building up for a while and he was pretty sure what it was. He went to the doctor, but blood work showed his white count was normal. My dad had to scream in agony on their table for ages before they finally gave in and took him into surgery. They went in and saw a perfectly healthy-looking gallbladder. They pulled it out, cut it open, and what looks like dry sand spills out. Deformed trypsin protein chains. We learned later that it had completely stopped working and totally filled with these protein chains. They estimated that it hadn't functioned for years. It was removed before it started killing my dad in earnest. So yeah, people fake it, people lie, but you should double-check just in case. We learned this when Dad was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder called alpha-1 antitrypsin FM phenotype. It's not fun. His lungs and liver deteriorate over time because of incorrectly shaped proteins getting stuck in his liver cells and not making it to the lungs, to put it simply. And yes, my dad is being studied. Every time he gets a biopsy, doctors gather data because his phenotype is so rare. I got a call from my son's nurse when he was in 2nd grade, and the conversation went like this. The nurse said, sounding upbeat and cheerful, "Your son wants to tell you his terrible news." The son gets on the phone and says, "Hi, Mom, I cut my finger off." I asked him, "All right, where's your finger now?" "I put it back on." "Can I talk to the nurse, sweetie?" The nurse gets on the phone again and says, "It sounds serious, right?" And I asked, "Does he have a substitute teacher today?" "Ah, yes, of course he does." I told the nurse to let him know that I'd take him to the hospital for a shot to his finger, to which he says, "I think it's okay, I glued it on real good." The nurse kept him in the office for a bit to talk about scary changes in the classroom. I don't know why anyone would want to fake anything medical, unconsciousness in particular. I got a compound fracture recently and called 911 on myself and was put on hold. Fun stuff. But I got through and asked them to send help. The operator was actually a complete baddie and kept asking me questions to keep me conscious. The ambulance folks arrive, casually got out of the ambulance, walked up to me and then saw the bones sticking out of my body and said, quote, "Oh, you're actually hurt." "Yeah, did you think I called 911 because I spilled some lemonade?" Then it occurred to me that most of their calls must be complete horse crap. But to cause me even more confusion, I received close to a $2,000 bill for the privilege of actual help and the ride to the hospital. That ludicrous bill is no fault of the EMS. I'm very much appreciative of their existence and they don't get nearly enough credit. But the best part of receiving that bill? The ambulance ride was roughly $1,850. The fentanyl they gave me was $2.15. Okay, the inverse of this question. What can somebody do if they're not faking it, but for whatever reason they have multiple doctors insist they are faking it? But by never telling the patient they're faking it, nothing is ever resolved and it drags on for months and months. My primary care doctors recommended my current OB-GYN after my original ignored me saying I'd been bleeding down there for over a month and was in such extreme pain I could barely get out of bed. Within 5 minutes of talking to my new doctor, he told me he thought I might have endometriosis and we booked the surgery. Turned out I had a pretty severe case of it and PCOS with my left ovary being the same size as my uterus and was at risk of bursting. So glad I finally had a doctor take me seriously after a decade. Yeah, we seem to have exhausted a lot of our answers from the actual professionals early on, but stories like this are still useful. If you know that you're in a bad way and not getting the help you need, it might be possible and necessary to go get someone else less jaded. And maybe they can give you a note or something to give to your usual providers if you don't switch entirely. When I had a stroke 10 months ago, my biggest fear was that I was somehow faking it and the ambulance ride was a sham and why I was doing it. No, turns out I was having a stroke. I was so worried about being a faker, although I've never done that before. Just a really odd mental state. Brief note for all the student doctors out there, people can pass stroke field tests and still be having a stroke. I could do everything on the field while I had a clot in my brain, verified by CT and MRI, except I couldn't stop throwing up. Good times. You should be aware that sometimes stuff just doesn't look like you think it should. I am in the middle of being treated like I'm faking, and it's really frustrating. I had a tool slip at work and hit me in the eye and forehead. Knocked me out for a second and I lost sight in my eye. An hour later, I started getting my sight back, but it hasn't fully come back. It's been months now. 2 things I got diagnosed were ocular migraines and vitreous detachment, and a concussion, but none of those things explain why my vision is still blurry in my right eye. Except the vitreous detachment, which causes floaters, but my issue is like blurry vision, like I have Vaseline in my eye. But doctors keep telling me that I'm fine, that I need to go back to work. One doctor told me to think about the economy, and that I was lucky to have a job right now. So I quit my job. I still want to see out of my right eye, but none of these doctors are taking me seriously. God, I got the same kind of crap from my psychiatrist one time. I can't give you any meds unless it's affecting your job. I don't have a job because I can't work. Well, it's not affecting your job since you don't have one. Frickin' bullcrap. When a doctor tells you about the economy, you should find a new doctor. I went to emergency once with intense chest pain. The young new doctor that I saw first listened to my chest and immediately concluded that I had pericarditis. But the supervising doctor decided I was faking it for meds for some reason. The next morning, I woke up to a psychologist in my room asking all sorts of random crap when an orderly interrupted because the ultrasound guy was in and wanted to see me first thing. I think after talking to the first doctor I saw. Turns out I had pericarditis and myocarditis, and the guy wheeled me out himself and told them to order an ambulance to take me to a hospital with a cardiac clinic. Look, you know they're faking when most of their story or description or exam doesn't make any sense. There are usually things that contradict each other. Abdominal pain is generally easy to tell when people are faking. For example, I'll press my stethoscope instead of just listening. They don't respond to that pressure, but will when I use my hands instead. Sometimes I'll ask them if they're experiencing a symptom that will rule out a diagnosis or make it less likely, and many times they think I'm asking it to support their supposed issue, so they'll say they have it. Most of the time people aren't faking, but just blow their symptoms out of proportion. Still some time in officially becoming a doctor, but I've been taught what to watch out for. Doctors expect symptoms from you, not signs. People who Google diseases often tell signs that they shouldn't be aware of. Some other clues include refusing blood work, exaggerating your condition, description not matching their history, and if it happens around public holidays or long weekends, suspicion is always increased. As a patient, it's apparently very sus if you say you don't want an oxy script. I had the same stuff happen. The doctor started filling one out for me and I told him not to bother since I wouldn't fill it. He got annoyed and said he wouldn't prescribe anything stronger. I got annoyed and said I didn't ask for anything stronger. For messed up reasons, oxy or hydro or codeine just don't work for me. Advil literally does more for me than any of those, so I'll just take an ibuprofen. But apparently the way I phrased that made the doctor think that I was asking for better meds instead of explaining that I'm just not going to bother with the worthless ones that they default to. Hey guys, I just want to remind everyone to be careful here. Patients lie, that's true, but it's important to remember that in the US there's a massive level of discrimination and lowered standards of care for many patients due to the staff's perception. Be very cautious. Thinking that somebody's faking when they're really not can lead to serious consequences for both staff and patients. I had a 360 testicular torsion, and a doctor thought I just had some inflamed glands due to my reactions. Luckily, I came back after they sent me home, or I would have lost my ball. I just wanted to point out that there are many types of seizures, and there's a bit of stigma surrounding people who have them. Some people have focal aware seizures and will be able to respond and control their limbs during the episode. It's dangerous to assume that somebody's faking just because they aren't experiencing a seizure like how you expect seizures to look. I once had a patient with appendicitis. Every time I prodded him, to check whether he actually had it or not, it would be pain in different spots. Soon it got to a point where wherever I prodded him, he screamed like a stuck pig. I mean, that's a dead giveaway sign that someone's faking. I'm looking at these other answers and hoping my doctor doesn't think I'm crazy. I've been recovering from long-haul COVID and it makes it seem like I want meds, but in reality, I just want answers.
Patients of Reddit. What happened when a doctor or nurse accused you of faking it when you were actually in need of urgent medical care? My friend's dad went to the ER and the doctor said he was fine after minimal examination. Her dad insisted something was wrong and said he wouldn't leave until they ran some tests. As he was being escorted out by security, he had a brain aneurysm and died. Her family was awarded a pretty massive malpractice settlement, but they were absolutely devastated. I fell down a flight of stairs one time while working, hit a nail on the way down and ripped my forearm open and was bleeding a good bit. Adrenaline had me going long enough for my girlfriend, a nurse at another hospital, to drive me there. I had a bloody paper towel on my arm and all the security guards and nurses assumed I was a junkie that blew a vein. Finally, all the hype wore off and I kinda passed out and woke up in a wheelchair in the exam room. I don't know exactly what happened, but my girlfriend was flipping out on the workers. She said half of them assumed I was on drugs and the other half thought I was faking it to skip the line. I wasn't dying of blood loss or anything. I just got woozy when I actually was able to see the meat in my arm for the first time. They all just watched me as I fell to the floor and busted my head on the floor. Even then, they didn't do anything. My girlfriend, who's not even half my size as I'm not a small guy at all, had to pick me up and drag me into the wheelchair. Screw that hospital. Not as a patient, but as a parent of a patient. My wife and I started to suspect that something was wrong with our son starting at age 2. He would run around all day and was an active little guy but never sweat. He also never appeared to get cold. We live in New England and he would often take his shirt off before going to sleep even in the winter months. These concerns were dismissed as a toddlers are weird sort of thing by his doctor. We later noticed that he would stop and complain about his hands or feet hurting while playing or laying in bed. These were also dismissed. We were told that the pain in his feet could be because his feet are flat or because of growing pains. We were told that it could also be attention related. The doctor said that it's not uncommon for middle children to act out. This continued for 4 years. My sister is a biologist and asked us if we ever got him checked for Fabry disease. I flat out asked the doctor if he could be tested, and the doctor told us that there was no way this was Fabry, and they weren't going to test a kid without any genetic history of the disorder. The disorder is genetic, and without a classic sign, one that often doesn't show up until adulthood, if it shows up at all. We waited until our son was literally screaming in bed about how his hands and feet feeling like they were on fire. We demanded to get him tested, and he was diagnosed with Fabry. It's essentially a metabolic disorder caused by a missing enzyme. There are many issues associated with it, but the main one is extreme neuropathic pain in the hands and feet. The pain can be random, but with my son, it is normally because he overheated since he lacks the ability to sweat. He plays sports, so we have to be careful. Overactivity and fevers have to be watched out for since his body can't cool itself down. Pain can last anywhere from a couple of minutes to a couple of days. The average age of this diagnosis for this disorder is around 16, so it's not surprising that his doctor missed it. Most doctors do since it's a rare disorder. That was a little over a year ago, and my son is doing well now. There is no cure, but treatment allows him to live a relatively normal life with some added pain. I couldn't imagine making him wait until his teens to get any relief. I was in labor, and because it was my first, they acted like I had no idea what was happening and kept denying what I was insisting. I was over 2 months early and handled pain so well, they acted like it was just in my head, made me stand at the counter filling out paperwork while I insisted I needed to push. They decided to lay me down to check if I had even started dilating, and I promptly pushed him out. I was furious with how I was treated. I still am. My mother had a stroke at age 32. The doctors didn't diagnose it properly for over 24 hours because they were convinced her symptoms must have been related to drugs since she was in good health and so young. My dad apparently tried to tell them that she has no history of drug use, but they didn't believe him. Now, she's permanently disabled because of how long it took for her to receive proper treatment. Not me, but my best friend nearly died of a kidney infection that her doctor brushed off as period cramps. Not me, but my mother. She had called an ambulance because she had been experiencing chest pains, to which they basically told her she was crazy. About a month later, she passed away from a heart attack. When I was in labor, the hospital had my records wrong and showed I was due a month later. I was ticked, especially since I was in labor and in a lot of pain. The lady kept arguing until she realized I was in labor. She must have heard all the crap my boyfriend, now husband, were talking about her. Happened to my mom. They told her she was having an anxiety attack. She was having a heart attack. Was 12 years old and had a heart problem that was just starting to show. Arrhythmia and palpitations. Only happened when overexerting myself. Go to cardiologist and was accused of faking it to get out of chores and soccer practice. By the time I'm 15, my heart is absolutely unreliable throughout the day. During an attack, I would lose my sight and pass out. Same cardiologist still claimed I was faking it. Kids just don't have heart conditions. 16 years old and my heart finally stops. Luckily, I passed out earlier at school and was in the nurse's office when my heart stopped after another episode. Woke up in the hospital and, by the way, had a heart deformation that required surgery. My mother blew her lid, according to my doctor, of wanting to see me dead. Went to his office and threw his degrees and awards office wall at him and was screaming at him. Only reason she didn't sue was to prevent assault charges. Simple echocardiographs showed growth causing the electricity to pump my heart to go into circles. Wasn't fun having heart attack simulations nearly every day for 4 years. Before anyone asks, was poor and that cardiologist was the only one on my mother's insurance. To my doctor's credit, we both kind of had a laugh at this before the test results came back. I went to my primary because I had been experiencing hot flashes. Dr. Google couldn't tell me what was wrong, and I knew it didn't feel right. Well, at least we know it wasn't menopause, my doctor joked. I laughed. What 23-year-old woman spontaneously goes through menopause? This one. My doctor was very apologetic. I'm on hormone therapy now and doing fine. Luckily didn't end up with any crazy negative side effects, but could have if my doctor didn't run a full workup just to be safe. Changing it up just a little, my colleagues were convinced a girl was just faking a stomachache. She was about 16 years old and it was exam season, a time when we would get many sudden tummy aches, fits, etc., so I understood their skepticism, but something didn't sit right with me. I took her history myself and sent her for an emergency ultrasound of her abdomen, ectopic pregnancy. I was ready to rupture at any moment, so I shipped her over to OBS/GYN to get surgery ASAP. She came out just fine, but man oh man did I give my coworkers a hard time after that. Exam season or not, we need to be thorough. Had another time when it was just me and one other doctor working admission. She dismissed a case of a little girl faking fatigue for attention. Thankfully, I overheard her telling someone, so I went to double check. The poor girl was having a carpopedal spasm and was most definitely not faking her condition. Hooked her up to some calcium and sent her home with meds the next day. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm perfect, but in our line of work, we must always be a little paranoid. I wouldn't really say they didn't believe that I was in pain, but didn't believe how much pain I was in. In February 2016, I started getting side cramps. I went to the ER, they said I had a tiny ovarian cyst. Okay, cool. I've had those before. In March 2016, I started my period and it continued until June. Between March and May, I went to at least 7 doctor's offices and ERs. I've had several ultrasounds and always had about 5 to 6 cysts spread between both of my ovaries. I was told I was too young. You're only 23, we don't want to take the cysts out because it could damage your ovaries, or you could lose one or both if something goes wrong, and what if you want to have kids one day? And on one instance, it's a Saturday and we don't feel like calling a surgeon in. I was calling off work or leaving early at least once a week. I always had a portable heating pad on and taking pretty heavy pain pills. In May 2016, I finally found a doctor who would do exploratory surgery on me. He pretty much opened me up, went, "Holy crap," and closed me back up. I then had to have a major surgery a couple weeks later because my left ovary had eaten the cysts and was attaching itself to my colon and artery in my leg. So I ended up losing my ovary anyway. I did throw a see you later ovulator party before my big surgery, which was a big hit. I'm trying to think of an after-while crocodile pun with the body part, but I'm drawing a blank. Any YouTube comments want to take a shot at it? Not my child, my brother. He was 11 and suddenly tired and lethargic. He missed a lot of school. He hated missing school. My mom kept taking him in, and they'd say it's the flu or puberty or mono, and it wouldn't ever get better. After a few weeks of this, my mom brought him to the hospital again and yelled at his doctors that something was seriously wrong with their son and they needed to do their jobs and figure out what it was. It was leukemia. They called the next morning just before 2 a.m. and said the test came back, your son needs to come in now. Not in the morning, right now. I can't imagine what happens to a parent in that moment when you know it's bad because they call you in at 2 a.m., but you don't know why. He was in treatment for just over a year and was re-diagnosed on his birthday. A few months later, he had a bone marrow transplant and was able to come home pretty quickly. There were complications from the transplant called graft versus host disease, like organ rejection, but the new cells try to reject you. It attacked his musculoskeletal system, causing stiffness in some dangerous situations. This October will be 8 years since the transplant, and he's cancer-free. That boy loves to use the cancer card now, but he's definitely earned the right. A doctor didn't believe me when I had a kidney stone that was too big to pass. He only changed his mind when another doctor checked me and started freaking out since I was getting super sick from the stuck stone. The doctor ended up getting fired from the hospital and my parents sued him. I wouldn't call it urgent medical care, but I was stuck in my room for about 5 hours on my bed with my head pressed into my shoulder because I had pinched a nerve. I had never had one before. I wasn't able to move my head at all, and when my mom got home from work, she called an ambulance for me. They carried me out in a sitting position and off to the hospital we went. When we got there, it took about a half hour for me to get into the hospital bed and ended up just giving up and leaving me sitting upright. The doctor pulled my mom out of the room and asked if I had a history of faking injuries in order to get painkillers, because I was pressing against the pain instead of leaning my head away from it. I had bronchitis, which turned into pneumonia, and when I went to the nurse, she sent me back to class because my fever was only 99. By the end of school, I made it home on the bus, but I had to go to the emergency room because I couldn't breathe. My lungs were filled with fluid. I was in 4th grade. I was out of school for 2 weeks, I think. When I was 16, I was in a really dark place, and one day I decided to confide to my doctor that I thought I might be depressed and see what he would recommend. Dude straight up laughed in my face and said, "You're not depressed, you're just a teenager." I told my mom I wanted to change doctors after that, and it took another year and tons of self-destructive behavior before I sought help again. Urgent a condition as the others, but it still manages to raise my blood pressure years later. Starting from when I was about 7, I would have terrible stomach pains, which my pediatrician claimed was attention-seeking behavior. He told my parents that they should punish me anytime I complained of stomach problems. My parents, who love yelling, jumped at a new reason to scream at me on a nearly daily basis. When I went to college, I was finally diagnosed as having a hiatal hernia, just like my grandparents, father, and aunt. When I was a kid, they even commented that I had the same symptoms they did, which for my pediatrician meant that I was just mimicking their complaints and didn't have the same condition. Because it had been untreated for so long, I now have to worry about Barrett's and esophageal cancer. Lucky me. New hearing doctor didn't believe that I needed hypoallergenic molds made and ended up making regular ones to try them out. Within a few days, my left ear was sore. It hurt a lot more than usual. Doctor and ear specialist thought it was just a little bit of irritation and that it would clear up quickly. It ended up being a major middle inner ear infection. Ruptured the eardrum, pus and blood everywhere on my pillow. About a month of agony, a lot of drugs, and a lot of specialists in the hospital. I was already very hard of hearing. That made me lose another 10 decibels permanently. This isn't so much a faking it situation, but more of my ex-girlfriend having to deal with a really incompetent security guard that hindered her getting medical help. My ex had a severe peanut allergy, and one time she ate a Thai chicken pizza in the college cafeteria that did not list peanuts as one of the ingredients. After her throat started burning, she knew something was wrong, so she grabbed a glass of milk, which I guess helped a bit, and went outside for some air because she was having trouble breathing. A security guard was passing outside in front of the building and saw that she might need some help. At this point, my ex was panicking and frantically looking through her bag for her EpiPen. The security guard asked what was wrong, and she tried to explain that she had a severe peanut allergy and needed to be taken to the hospital. When the security guard saw her take out the EpiPen, she took it from her and said that it was school policy that she be the one to do it. She then asked her to hold out her arm so she could inject her. My girlfriend could not believe that the security guard was trying to inject her arm like it was a flu shot, and out of frustration, she yanked it from the guard's hand and put it in her thigh, like you were supposed to, and sternly told her, "I need to get to a hospital now." When I was 9, I would get stomach aches when I went to school. My doctor insisted I was faking, but my mom insisted he take it seriously. Finally, they gave me a barium x-ray and saw I had a stomach ulcer. I had to take Malox and drink milk at every meal and snack. I even had to get special permission to get milk from the cafeteria at morning recess. My teacher ridiculed me for that. She was horrible and abusive. While I never received any of her physical abuse, there were 2 other boys in my class who got it on a regular basis. This would have been 1980, so it wasn't normal for teachers to be pulling hair or knocking a kid's face into a desk. Every day, the 3 of us would have to stay after school while she told us all how stupid we were. My stomach aches did not get better, and the doctor accused me of some combination of faking/exaggerating/non-compliance. We literally had to save all the empty Malox bottles to prove I was really taking my daily doses. Today we know that having me drink milk 6-7 times a day was exacerbating things, and in retrospect, my mom never really understood how stressful it was being in that class. It wasn't until the last few months of 4th grade when they finally transferred me to another classroom that I got well again. Later, my mom told me that even she thought I'd been exaggerating when I talked about how mean the teacher was. Because I left the honors class and moved down a level, my former teacher still ridiculed me pretty frequently when we crossed paths, but it didn't tie my stomach up in knots. I'm just going to read this comment here because I agree with it completely. What a vile excuse for a human being. I can't believe individuals like this get to have any authority over young children. So sorry that happened to you. Not me, but my mother. She had been very sick and tired. Imagine a cold, but it's 100 times worse. The doctor she saw multiple times kept basically blowing it off, saying she just needed some rest. It kept getting worse. One day, I was home with her. She was in bed sleeping and I was out in the living room watching TV. For some reason, she decided to walk out into the living room and sit in the chair across from the couch. She looked like a legit zombie, and when she sat down, she could barely hold her head up. I immediately called 911. Turned out she had pneumonia, and one of her lungs was entirely full of fluid, while the other was more than halfway. She spent a few days in the hospital and fully recovered. I don't know what made her decide to walk into the living room, but if she hadn't, then she would likely have died that day. All of that could have been avoided if the doctor she saw would have just paid closer attention to what was going on. I can barely remember this, but I was around the age of 11. I went for a sore throat, severe cough that would make me dry heave, phlegm, just the whole thing. Doctor says it's all in my head, despite me having an obviously inflamed throat and a very wet cough. I remember sitting there with my grandma who was like, I don't think it was in her head. I went back the same week and was diagnosed with walking pneumonia. I think that's when we switched doctors too. Not a doctor or nurse, but a bunch of camp counselors and the infirmary doc. I went to a sleepaway camp for children with cancer or anything chronic and or life-threatening. It's the second day and I wake up feeling a little bit sick with a sore throat. Okay, I'll just drink some water and I'll be okay. It's the summer after all. I can't get sick. Breakfast rolls around at 10 a.m. and I'm not hungry and my throat is getting worse. I tell one of my counselors that I'm not feeling good and he says, eat something, wait till after the morning activity. I couldn't bring myself to swallow, so I just sat there and then went to arts and crafts. I feel so sick at this point, I just sit in the corner of the arts and crafts room, literally fading in and out. I tell a different counselor and he says, drink some water. I do, it doesn't help at all. I realize that they're not going to do anything unless I make a big deal about it. I think to stand up and make an announcement. When I stand up, I immediately need to sit down again, and now my throat hurts too much to talk. I say, I don't feel good in my raspy, weak voice. He says, wait until after this activity. Lunch comes around at 12:30 and I go to the bathroom before sitting down and I look like a zombie in the bathroom mirror. I go back to my table and I say I can't eat. The counselors ask me why. I say, I feel sick. One of the counselors begrudgingly agrees to take me to the infirmary, which was a mini hospital because all the kids here have medical issues. I can barely walk, but I make it there, and promptly get sat down on an old wood bench and left alone as my counselor walks back to eat lunch. After about 15 minutes of waiting, a doctor pokes her head out of her office and asks me what's wrong. I tell her, I felt sick since I woke up, my throat hurts. She feels my forehead and says, you don't feel warm, but I'll get a thermometer. She comes back with a thermometer and puts it under my tongue. I had a fever of 102 and strep throat at a tightly packed dining hall surrounded by kids with compromised immune systems. I'm surprised I didn't get anyone sick, but the fact that it took 5 hours to get a chronically sick kid some freaking medical attention still makes my blood boil. I was bedridden for 3 days and missed literally everything I wanted to do while there. The worst part was, this was my last year before I got too old. I was losing my hair, my gums bled randomly, my skin looked like garbage, my muscles cramped up randomly, I literally fell over once while standing on my feet, I got horribly depressed, world felt like cardboard is the only way I can think to describe it, and all I wanted to do was eat and sleep. Sometimes I would start talking in conversation and get a word jumble midway through where words didn't come out right, which was the beginning of some social anxiety for me. I went to several doctors who plainly thought I was full of it. Several of them asked me how much I drank, and one of them asked me over and over again as if he didn't believe me when I said I didn't. I was tested for low thyroid, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, and some other scary things, but nothing came up. This was over a 6-month period. I finally figured it out by Googling my symptoms, which led me to a message board that suggested I find a doctor who would give me a blood test for it so I would know for sure. Turns out I was really low on B12, somewhere in the low 300s I think. They went from nearly eye-rolling me to my face to giving me a B12 shot in the office before I left on my second visit and prescribing sublingual B12 to me. I actually found out a few years later that I have a gene mutation that keeps me from methylating B vitamins. I mention it to every new doctor I see now, and they always look at me like I'm a hypochondriac, then look it up on their laptop and kind of go, okay, like they're relieved I'm not full of crap. Not exactly accused of faking it, more so just disbelieved or taken lightly. I went into emergency at the hospital because it was Saturday for a medium-level abdominal pain that had been ongoing since the previous weekend. I'd been to the general practitioner on Wednesday or Thursday and had a blood test booked for the coming Tuesday, early as possible. However, my mom decided to take me in because of how long it lasted without change. At the hospital, I had a blood test taken and the doctor thought 50 milligrams of codeine would take care of my non-problem. It did nothing, so he gave another one and Panadol. He ended up believing it would work, but it sent everyone frantic when I ended up bent over, frothing at the mouth and coughing up blood. The blood test said pancreatitis. My brother had severe asthma, as in I'd wake up in the middle of the night to paramedics and an ambulance and only ask which grandparents I was going to wake up at. He had an asthma attack in school and his second grade teacher declared that he was faking it. Another teacher, Mrs. B, who was also friends with my mom, told her that he had a very well-documented history. Several medical journal articles written about him by this point, with more to follow as he got older. He was definitely having an asthma attack and needed his inhaler and possibly several breathing treatments now. We kept several different inhalers at the school, but they had to be given by the nurse. The second grade teacher once again declared she knew what an asthma attack looked like and he was faking it. Mrs. B, the friend teacher, took him out of class immediately, tried the inhalers, and called our mom. He ended up staying in the hospital for several weeks and wasn't well enough to go to school for months. The school district not only had to pay for tutors to come to our house to help him keep up with classes, but also had to pay for his medical costs since mom was also a teacher. The second grade teacher tried to get Mrs. B in trouble for removing a student from her classroom without permission and almost got fired herself for causing the situation to get as bad as it did. Mom also was granted a transfer to our elementary school, which she had been trying to get for a while to help make sure my brother's health was okay, and she helped create an amazing, successful reading program there. The school district also implemented some changes that allowed kids with rescue inhalers to be able to keep them with them instead of with the nurse, as long as certain procedures were followed. The second grade teacher, on my brother's first day back to school, declared in a loud voice, "The next time, let me know if you need your inhalers." The overprotective big sister in me took over and loudly shouted back, "He did!" The school secretary gleefully told my mom it was the first time she had ever heard me talk above a whisper.
Police officers of Reddit, what was your "they could have gotten away with it if they had kept their mouth shut" moment? I had a car pass me once where a passenger hangs the upper half of his body out of the passenger side window with his middle finger in the air while screaming, "Muck the police!" He had my attention for the seatbelt violation. I got behind the car and ran the registration. Registration is suspended. Registered owner's driver's license is attached to the registration and his license is suspended. Registered owner also has 2 warrants for retail theft. I stopped the car and they both started with the free speech thing and how I can't stop them for giving me the fingers, which is 100% correct. When I pointed out that I can, however, stop them for the passenger not wearing a seatbelt and for the registration violation, suddenly they both got quiet. Driver got arrested for suspended license and his warrants, and the passenger got himself a citation. The driver's vehicle got impounded. Moral of the story? Tell your passengers to shut their mouths. Had that guy not been a moron, his buddy would have been homeward bound. Not a cop, but a public defender had a client who made a long statement that didn't help her case, but the judge was letting her go without setting bail. Before leaving the courtroom, however, I was informed that the police from another precinct were coming to pick her up, and she'd be held until they did. They didn't get her until much later, but I told her to absolutely not say anything to them, to keep her mouth shut. The next day I go to do her arraignment, and I get the notice of any statements, which started with, "My lawyer told me not to say anything, but this is what happened," and admitted to a variety of crimes. It was frustrating, to say the least. Not a police officer, but I do know of this house in my local village that was a notorious den of illegal substances. The police came to search that place but couldn't find anything, and as they were leaving, the lovely owner yelled at them that they should have brought the dogs. So yeah, they came back a few days later with the illegal substance sniffing dogs and found huge amounts of that hidden away. Absolute morons. When I was growing up, a cop approached my mom, who's an attorney, at our house. She closed the door behind her, and I watched the interaction inside with my doggo. Now, my mom was always very honest with me about criminal stuff. She probably wanted to scare me out of committing crimes, something that largely worked. She comes back inside a good 30 minutes later and tells me about the stupidest dealers ever. Guy and girlfriend sell mad amount of illegal substances just down the block from my house. They are the big boy distributors of the area. It's a decent-sized city, but on the smaller side, so I don't know how the heck the illegal substance scene works. And the cops have been hoping to bring these guys down. Well, the cops caught a break when they confessed to a dispatcher. Turns out they were robbed by a rival dealer, and their computer was stolen. This is the early 2000s, so desktops were pretty clunky, along with all of their illegal substance. They called 911 and proceeded to tell them all of these details, somehow never realizing their stupidity. The cops swooped in, the station is literally 2 minutes away, and arrested the lot of them. and then told my mom everything. They were in our neighborhood, and my mom knows and is loved by everyone. Moral of the story? When reporting your house is being robbed, maybe leave out the part where all of your illegal substances was stolen. You know, I'm really curious how that conversation actually went down over the phone. 911, what's your emergency?
Oh, thank God. Everything's been robbed. I'm reporting a robbery.
Okay.
My new Dell computer and all my illegal substances are gone.
Oh, please go on.
The white stuff, the powder, the sugar cherries, all the wings. It's the good stuff.
Yep. We'll come pick you up in a couple minutes.
Honey, I did it. I told them everything. Oh God, I told them everything.
I was asked to help keep the peace while 2 probation officers searched a guy's house. In most jurisdictions, you have to submit to a search of your person and your home if you're on probation. During the search, a PO lifted the probationer's mattress and said monotonously, "Wow." The probationer got upset and said, "Yeah, it's freaking snow in my piece. Arrest me. I don't give a freak." Turns out the PO found a huge naughty toy, but after the guy opened his mouth, the PO lifted the mattress more and found a bunch of individually wrapped grams of snow and a weapon. The PO said that seeing the naughty toy was enough for him to ignore the mattress, but because the guy said something, he kept looking. That guy's attitude and his need to open his mouth got him 10 years in prison. Not me, but my boyfriend. Boyfriend's working overnight when a guy comes through town doing 35 miles per hour in a 25-mile area. Boyfriend pulls the guy over and asks for his documentation, license, registration, insurance. Guy flips open his glove box, snatches his documents out, and snaps the glove box closed super fast. Boyfriend laughs and says, "What do you have in there?" Guy gets a little sheepish and says,
Registration, insurance, a little bit of leaf.
Boyfriend, "What?" Guy coughs and says,
Registration, insurance, and a little bit of leaf.
Boyfriend laughs again and says, seriously? Can I see? Guy got a slap on the wrist for being honest and having a very small amount. Currently watching live PD, and the guy told the officer,
I have caffeine pills in my back pocket.
Gets them out, puts them on the hood. Everyone's chill. The dude then comes clean and says it's Molly, and the officers look at each other and go, "Do we even have a test kit for that?" Other officer says, "No." Dude's face just shows he should have kept his mouth shut. I saw PD as well, ironically in my hometown, where a woman pulled off the highway unnecessarily with another car that the cop initially intended to pull over. She mentioned to the cop that she wanted to have a few words with the other vehicle because they were being rumpholes and trying to race her. This is why the cop pulled the other car over, because they were speeding. Anyways, officer tells her no and that she needs to leave, and that it would not only be unsafe but also illegal if she got out of her vehicle like that on the side of the highway. She says, okay, whatever. Cop proceeds to speak with the other vehicle, and she is still parked there, now yelling out her window at the other vehicle. Both the cop and the people are laughing, and he still does nothing. Cop goes to write the speeding ticket, and this witch gets out of her car and approaches the other vehicle. He finally freaking cuffed her and put her in the squad car, all the while she's complaining that it's completely unfair, was completely dumbfounded. Okay, so we had a DUI accident where a guy kept driving straight into the woods into a tree because his GPS was predicting a future street. He walked back to his hotel room and left his check and papers in the car. So we go to the hotel and go to his room and knock on the door. He did not have to answer, but he did. He was pretty clearly intoxicated. I asked him if he had anything to drink since the accident. He did not have to answer, or he could have told us that he drank after the accident. He said, "No, I haven't had anything to drink since the accident." And where I'm from, you have 24 hours to report a property damage only accident, so it wasn't even a hit and run. So, as I'm locking the guy up, he tells me he's a lawyer. I told him, I hope you're not a defense attorney. But in his defense, he was intoxicated. I can respect that. A man who follows his GPS, his Siri, all the way to the end. Turn left.
But Siri, that's just the ocean. Are you sure that's the way to Disney World?
Yes, turn left. Do it now.
Okay, here we go.
Yes, another one. When I was in high school, I liked to park in parking spots that cars had parked poorly into just as a muck you. One time, I was at a high school football game and a Jeep had parked like crap. He was nearly halfway into the spot next to him and parked at an angle. I was driving a 98 Chevy Silverado at the time, a big old pickup truck, and I had my brother help guide me into the spot so I was perfectly in the lines. That made it so the driver door was completely impossible to get in. I took a picture for the novelty of it and went on my way. When I got back to my car, the Jeep was gone and every panel on the passenger side of my car was keyed. There was an officer nearby, so I told him about it and showed him the picture. He told me there's not a lot they could do because there were no witnesses, but he'd give it a shot. He looked up their license plate, called them, and asked them if they had done it. They confessed and ended up having to pay $1,600 in restitution along with getting a felony. My friend was pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt while he was with a few buddies, gets handed his ticket, and the guy in the back seat says, "Am I going to get a ticket too?" Officer replies, "Well, were you wearing a seatbelt?" No." "All right. Can I see your ID?" Not really the brightest fella. I don't know why, but I love how, he was excited by this. Hey, oh, come on, man. Can I have a ticket?
Yeah, me too. Come on, I want one. Let's all get one.
Oh, shucks. All right, kids. Everyone gets a ticket today. Hooray!
I pull over this guy for expired tabs, ask for his ID, and he's feeling around for his wallet. Can't find it. He says, man, I'm one of you. It's cool." "Oh, what department?" "Oh, actually, I'm a security guard, but same thing." I'm polite. "So, where's your ID?" "Oh, it's in the..." And he motions to the trunk. "It's in the trunk?" "Actually, no." My BS radar is going off. "Okay. You want to get your ID out of the trunk?" Nah, I don't have it." He starts looking around for another story to use, but now I know I'm supposed to stay out of the trunk. He's also not giving me any more information. "No ID, then I have to take you in and get you fingerprinted." I'm going to get in that trunk one way or another. He's looking like he's lost. I ask him what's in the trunk, but he's not talking anymore. We pull him out and get him in cuffs. Another officer takes him to get ID through fingerprints. Since his car is expired past 6 months, California laws, we tow the car. In the process of getting ready to tow the car, we need to take a quick inventory. In the trunk was a police uniform with fake patches and a metal badge. No weapon, but a duty belt. He also has stacks of explicit imagery of children. This is a guy who a neighboring city had been looking for months. His MO was to dress as a police officer, talk to kids, and you can figure out the rest. If he just gave me his name, I could have looked up his ID and verified he had one. I'd probably have let him go, but the neighboring city had zero information as to his name. They only had a vague description of the car and the fact he was posing as a police officer. In fact, what he would do is start talking to a kid in the 9 to 12-year-old range, tell him he has to be taken in for questioning, and handcuff the kid and take him to his car. He was a bad dude. So this happened a few years ago. I was patrolling my buddy at night. It was almost the end of our shift. Suddenly, we get an alert that a local nearby gas station had just been robbed, unsuccessfully, and that the suspect was supposed to pass by us in a red car. Indeed, seconds later, we saw a man speeding through the road. Details on the side, we ended up catching him on a dead-end street. When my buddy was handcuffing the suspect, I asked the suspect if he had something to do with the robbery. He repeatedly said,
I've never been there. Ask the ginger lady.
Turns out the cashier that night was an old lady named Marcy, covering up for her ill daughter, who would have never been able to identify him since he was wearing a black mask during the robbery, which we never found. Marcy had ginger hair. Fortunately, the suspect was kind enough to inadvertently confess the crime. How could he know the appearance of the cashier if he had never been at the crime scene? The jury thought the same. Fellow officers stopped a car for a turn violation. Guy's wannabe illegal substance dealer, who we've seen around the bars before. We were talking with him and asked permission to search his car. He agrees. I'm bullcrapping with him about sports and weather, and the officer finds a duffel bag. So I joke and say, nothing in there that's dangerous, right? Like bombs or grenades or explosives. He nods and says, yeah, a bunch of dynamite. I'm waiting for him to laugh or smile or shrug or do something that screams it's a joke. Nothing. I say, I'm going to open the bag and look, okay? Expecting at any moment he will stop me. He doesn't. It was 8 sticks of dynamite he stole from a construction site. Separate story. If he didn't say anything, I would have ignored the bag thinking it was tools. He was getting supplies from an MC to terminate someone. Needless to say, he went to prison for a few years. Pulled a guy over because his car was looking pretty run down. Wanted to lecture him that he shouldn't be driving around at night with only half his lights working. We got out of our car, and I approached the driver window, and he looks at me and says, yeah, all right, I admit it. I smoked some leaf. Alrighty then. Wanted to give him another chance. What? We know your lights are broken. No, I smoked the leaf. Cue the eye roll. Gosh darn it, man. So we parked his car and drove him to have a blood test done. We were already done with our shift for an hour because we waited for a long time for the doc. So when we got out, I was ready to go home. He turns to me and says, I can't call anyone to pick me up or I'll get in trouble. Good Samaritan kicks in, ends up driving the guy home. He's a chill dude, obviously. I don't know what happened to him afterwards. He probably lost that internship we were talking about. Some idiots from my hometown broke into a few houses in the early 2000s. Among several stolen items was a handheld video camera. They proceeded to record themselves breaking into several more houses and posing back home with their haul. Several of the items, including said camera, ended up at pawn shops. Well, when the battery died, they didn't remove the tape. As is customary, the pawn shop found a compatible charger and watched the recordings. Copies of their fingerprints, IDs, and the video were turned into the police, and these morons went to jail. Almost everything from the videos was recovered from area pawn shops. Not a cop, but I have a buddy that is. Nothing too crazy, but he's had countless moments where he's tried to give people a break, or all they had to do was sit down and be quiet. But they end up talking themselves into jail. Recently had a dude he pulled over that was a bit over the limit for a DUI, but not too much. So he was going to let a friend pick him up instead of arresting him. Guy got to talking and basically revealed driving under the influence was something he did fairly regularly. A single mistake is one thing, but my buddy decided the best chance at getting him to stop would be learning the lesson the hard way. Not a cop. I had a roommate in college that was no friend of mine. He got in a fight at a bar and was kicked out. He tried to go back into the bar and got thrown out again, but a cop happened to be driving by the second time. The cop told him to relax or he was going to be arrested, and he told the cop to arrest him. The cop handcuffs him and puts him in the back of the cop car. Roommate then started banging on the window. Cop then recuffed him with his hands behind his back. Roommate's stupidity carried on for the next couple of months. He was supposed to go to court over the whole thing but didn't show up. Police showed up at his job, cuffed him, and brought him to court. Judge told him he would have just received a slap on the wrist, but he now had to send him to jail for a couple of days. He was scheduled to report to jail a week or two later, and he didn't show up for that either. By this time, he disappeared. I never saw the guy again. Not a cop, but a witness. During college, my friends and I would hang out outside and smoke hookah. Frequently, we would invite strangers who passed by to join, or campus police would casually chat with us as they made their rounds. So, one time, a group of freshmen walked past and asked to join. After about 15 minutes, the campus police car rolls up and the freshmen get visibly nervous. We tell them to calm down. The cops are chill. As soon as the cop gets out of the car, one freshman bolts and he makes it about 20 feet before the cop tackles him. We all clap and heckle the kid. Upon searching him, the cop finds a bunch of leaf. Then he says, "You realize prior to running I had no reason to be suspicious? I just wanted to talk to my friends over there," and points at us. The cop ends up writing a ticket and sends him off. In college, after an early football game, We had a large group at my house. We were planning on partying, but there was a really good game on, so everyone was just sitting around watching the game. We were about 50-50, underage, ages 20 to 22. There were a few people who had beers, but the drinking had not started. People were flowing in steadily, and I guess the neighbors saw the amount of cars and called the cops to file a noise complaint at 7 p.m. There was a knock at the door, and someone said, "Come in." In walks a cop. I surveyed the room to realize everyone who had a beer was over 21, except one. Just as the officer was about to speak, she takes off and dives from the couch to behind the kitchen counter. The cop pauses, shakes his head, said there was a noise complaint, but he had been sitting outside for 10 minutes and hasn't heard a word. Said to enjoy the game, looks at the kitchen, shakes his head again, and walks out. Luckily, I lived in the town next door to the college, or it would have been a rough night. This situation came from a friend of mine. So we lived with 3 other guys in a 4-bedroom apartment. One day, when only one roommate was home, the police came knocking. They asked if they could come in and search for suspected illegal substance usage. Here's where I should mention the roommate who was home was kind of an oblivious shut-in who spent most of his day playing World of Warcraft or Magic the Gathering in his room. So of course he says, "Sure, come on in," having no idea what his roommates have been up to. In room 1, they find nothing, as that was the oblivious guy's room. Room 2, they find a personal bag of leaf. Room 3, they find a pipe. Roommate 3 didn't smoke, but he and roommate 2 played video games a lot, so it belonged to roommate 2. In room 4, they find a possession with intent to distribute, giant bag of leaf. Apparently just a crap load. Roommate 2 told me it was the most leaves he'd ever seen in one place, and he was angry because he always bought from someone else. Didn't know his roommate was a dealer. 3 of the 4 get arrested. Only one who didn't was the guy who let them in. My friend was roommate 3. Charges against him got dropped because roommate 2 fessed up to the pipe being his and got a slap on the wrist. Not sure what happened to roommate 4. They never saw him again. Former Walmart employees of Reddit, what are your horror stories? My mom was a manager at Walmart. She told me about this woman who was trying to steal a prepaid phone. When she got caught by security, she used the knife she was attempting to open the plastic packaging with to cut the security dude after cutting herself. She then went on to scream at him that she has an infectious disease and now he's going to have it for trying to stop her. I used to do field service for Walmarts in the Portland, Oregon area. The East Portland stores were especially fun. The Wood Village, Eastport Plaza, and Happy Valley stores are relatively close together, and we text refer to them as the Gauntlet. The Eastport Plaza store was especially active, and we nicknamed that one the Thunderdome. Every visit, we would witness an arrest or something more exciting or disgusting. Last Christmas, for instance, while Frank Sinatra's version of Mistletoe and Holly was playing, a dude was totally face-planted by some cops after resisting arrest, in the process damaging the automatic doors and knocking over a display. Another time, a tech witnessed the arrest of the hottest-looking naughty worker ever on 82nd Street, being cuffed and stuffed in the parking lot. One day, I arrived at Thunderdome and noticed that I could not get the customer service desk to check in. Several workers were not allowing people to pass, and there was also a number of orange cones marking the restricted area. A quick whiff indicated what my eyes later confirmed. Crap all over the floor. The men's room is right next to the customer service area. Eventually, they had to break out the Zamboni machine to finish cleaning up. I had about 10 registers to work on there that day. They beat the hell out of their equipment in that store, and after 2 hours, I was ready to take a leak and check out. They still weren't letting anybody into the men's room. God only knows what horrors there must have been. Working there as a cashier since October, Christmas Eve rolls around, and thank God I'm not scheduled to work. Cue phone call from the manager asking why I haven't come in yet that day. I'm not on the schedule? Manager. Yes, you are. I'm not coming in. I wasn't on the schedule. Next day I worked was the day after Boxing Day went, and looked at the schedule, and lo and behold, someone wrote that I was supposed to work in pencil. I quit shortly thereafter. I had a coworker call me one morning, and when I answered the phone very sleepily, she just started crying and asked, "You didn't know you were scheduled, did you?" I hadn't been scheduled, but my boss changed the schedule after my previous day of work and didn't inform me. I couldn't get to work that morning because of my lack of transportation, and I had to hang up after a painful conversation with my sobbing coworker. I transferred not long after that since my boss let that happen a few more times. I shouldn't have to wake up at 5 in the morning to call my boss and see if I'm scheduled for the day simply because she changed the printed schedule constantly. See, coworkers couldn't leave until coverage arrived. If you're the only trained cashier and the next person doesn't show up and no one else on the floor is cashier trained, they want you to stay until the late person shows up. But if they'd already worked 8 hours and covered for 2 additional hours with their coverage not showing up, she was likely to be overworked and at her wit's end only to call and realize no one was coming and she'd have to do a double shift. I worked at Walmart about 13 years ago at one of the few stores left that closed overnight. It was a regular old Walmart, not at all super. I worked overnight stocking. I liked it. I only dealt with customers for a couple hours before the store closed and then just stocked the shelves. I mainly worked in the automotive department, and the nights would go by really fast. I worked with a bunch of people who were related to each other. There was a dad, Steve, his wife's sister, and a stepdaughter who worked there during the day in the jewelry department. Steve stocked the sporting goods department right next to mine. This guy was really gross. He would constantly pop over to my section and ask me if I needed help lifting stuff up onto the overstocked shelves, and he would make comments about how pretty I was and how if he was 10 years younger, he'd date me. Dude was pushing 50 and I was just a 19-year-old girl. I just laughed off his comments, say I didn't need help, and that I was perfectly happy with my boyfriend, thank you. One night, he decided to tell me how big his one-eyed monster was. He relayed a story, a total lie, I'm sure, about how one day he was getting out of the shower and his stepdaughter, who was 17, saw him accidentally and exclaimed about how nice his one-eyed monster was and how she wanted to try it out. I was dumbfounded and I did not know what to say. I just said, "Oh, well, I gotta get back to work," and kind of shuffled away. A week later, he was caught doing the deed with his wife's sister in the bathroom at work. They were both fired, his wife quit, and his stepdaughter continued to work there. Mine isn't as bad as some of those here, but it was its own special kind of awful. I worked on third shift for a summer between college years. The Walmart I was in had about 1 hour's worth of music playing over the speakers all night, playing on a non-stop loop. My sleep habits were already pretty mucked from trying to adjust to third shift, but the music is what really did it. I heard that same music loop over and over again, all shift, 5 days a week. When I left the store, I would still hear it running in my head. Then I started hearing it in my dreams. Then it got so ingrained that I started just dreaming I was working my shift at Walmart. Several days a week, I would have the experience of working an entire 8-hour shift. Then just around quitting time, my alarm clock would go off, and I would wake up and go work an 8-hour shift. I quit a few weeks early at the end of the summer because I was losing my gosh darn mind. I sprained my back moving product in the back. At first I thought it was a pulled muscle, and I walked towards the pharmacy to try and buy a heating pad and some Tylenol. I made it to jewelry, barely keeping conscious from the pain. I asked my coworker to call management and let them know I had hurt myself pretty badly and needed to go to the hospital. Management told her to have me go back to the office to fill out paperwork. I blacked out twice going back and was yelled at for taking so long. I ended up being out for a month and a half for the injury and got a whopping $24 in workman's compensation because the second I got hurt, my hours were reduced to 1 hour a week. I hate Walmart. A friend of mine was working part-time at Walmart. He'd been there for over a year. He was working any and all positions, shifts that they threw at him, so he could try to provide for his wife and unexpected baby. He started to apply for any and all full-time positions as they really needed the benefits. One day, management took him aside and told him this was not the Walmart way, and he needed to make a plan with steps on how to get a particular position. Apparently, anything full-time is not okay. Walmart wants to help you achieve your specific goals, but really Walmart wants to use you as much as they can and break your spirit. Once I had a woman who was giving me a hard time about a coupon that was expired. Coupon people are the worst. She refused to give up. She really wanted that $1 off. My line was getting really long and I was getting really frustrated. So I reached in my pocket and pulled out a $5 and said, "If I give you a $5, will you give up on this coupon?" She got angry and said, "I can't believe you said that to me." She told the CSM, but I didn't get in trouble for it. The amount of times that people ask me why we don't take coupons after they expire is ridiculous. They have a freaking date on them for a reason. I'll start with my grossest. A woman comes in with some underwear and said they didn't fit, and she wanted to return them for cash because she had already bought the correct size elsewhere. She had a receipt and plopped a Walmart bag down on the counter. Inside this bag were 6 crusty, crap-stained underwear that were a biohazard from 6 feet away. Needless to say, I did not touch them. I paged the manager on duty and he tells me to just take them back, despite being very gross. Processed the return and she happily left the store with her $8. Former cart pusher. Had an old lady try to tip me $1 after I helped her bring her newly bought plants or some crap to her car. Told her I couldn't accept it per company policy, and it was only $1, so it wasn't particularly enticing. She then proceeded to roll over in her little scooter mobile and stuff it down the front of my pants. She chuckled dirtily as she rolled away. Yo, Granny is making it rain over here. Look at all those pennies. Just tossing pennies at all of those cart pushers.
I love going to Walmart. I get to see all the chunky hunkies. Here, pennies for everyone.
I worked for Mallwart 11 years ago for a whopping total of 8 months. I worked the overnight shift as an overnight stalker for Department 8, Pets. The store I worked at had just gotten brand new high-rise shelves installed. They were said to be able to hold over a ton. Well, one night after getting all my regular freight stocked and overstock put into the bins, my bosses had me pull 8 pallets of Arm & Hammer cat litter. The boxes had a bonus 10 pounds inside, making them nearly 35 or so pounds apiece. They wanted all of those on the high risers. I asked if they were absolutely sure the shelves would be able to handle all that weight. I threw a crap fit about it because I know I was in the right for being worried. Other department managers who were there also sided with me. They watched me over the next couple of hours as I carefully did my job. As I was putting the final 12 boxes on the bottom shelf, I heard a cracking and tearing sound. And the next thing I know is I'm buried underneath all of the cat litter that had caused the shelves to collapse. Everybody in the store heard it happen, and everybody was explicitly told not to dial 911 or anything. Muck that crap. After getting all my blood cleaned from my face and cuts patched up, I called my uncles, then my girlfriend, who was a lawyer, told her what had just occurred and what the upper management is attempting to do. As of today, I still haven't spent all the money I received as a result of going to court over it. Muck Walmart. I was a department manager in frozen foods. One day, on one of my days off, so I didn't witness this, one of my employees came into work seeming very confused and disoriented. She couldn't remember the date, what day it was. Someone asked her what her name is. She couldn't remember. She clearly had what some would call a very minor case of serious brain damage. The store refused to call 911 and instead called for her mother to pick her up and take her to the hospital. Apparently something that not everyone appears to be aware of is that if you ask someone, "What is your name?" and they respond, "I don't know," then you need to call for an ambulance. This woman had a blood vessel in her brain that popped. Her head partially exploded. It could have terminated her. And those cheap plastards at Walmart wouldn't call 911. There was also someone in produce who had a heart attack. The store didn't call 911 for him either. One of the other produce associates had to volunteer to take him to the hospital. Walmart is the only place I've ever worked at where I could say they wouldn't care if I passed on right there in the store. And it wouldn't be hyperbole. Muck Walmart. Wow, there definitely is a theme here. That's 2 stories now of people nearly just getting terminated in the store. Is there a rule or something that you just can't call 911? That's insane. Why would they do this? What's wrong with you, Walmart? I was working at Walmart at the beginning of this year. Aside from weird older men hitting on me, it wasn't that bad. A few weeks before the minimum pay was raised, they decided I needed a new position in the store. I was told that I was great with people and need to be out helping customers as opposed to checking. Sales associates get paid less than cashiers. They told me that since it was basically a promotion for me, that they would let me keep the cashier pay instead of lowering me to sales pay. I agreed to the job for that reason, plus new job was full-time. A week later, they take me to sign the papers for the job switch, and the manager gets to the pay part. He says, I know we told you that we could keep the same pay, but it's just easier to make it the same as everyone else's. Besides, everyone's pay is going up in a few weeks anyway. So I just agreed, whatever, still going to be making more. Then my hours start getting cut. I agreed to 40 hours. I was cut down to 25. My manager said he messed up the schedule on accident and would fix it. It continued happening every week. I finally got so frustrated I just left one day and never came back. 4 hours into my first shift, I was facing items on a bottom shelf while a coworker was facing items on the top shelf. She dropped a gallon of Gatorade on my head. Management refused to let me report the injury or leave to seek medical attention. I finished the shift, dazed and in pain. The next day, I found out my skull was broken. Officially, since I was not allowed to report the injury, it didn't happen at work. I rage quit. This happened before I got hired, but I heard enough about it from coworkers. An elderly couple would come in once a week to go shopping. The old man had trouble walking, so he would kiss his wife and go sit in the fitting room area until she was done. One day, they came in and did the little kiss, and he also handed her his wedding ring, like he knew something was about to happen. A couple minutes of sitting there after his wife walked off, the guy collapsed to the floor, and the fitting room ladies called 911. One of the department managers of the time was also a paramedic, so he rushed over. The old guy started to cough up blood, and every available associate had to come and make a wall of people so customers don't see what is going on. All these associates saw and heard the guy choking on his own blood, now coming out of his nose and ears, passing on the floor. They were trying to find his wife, and no one could find her, and the associates had to wait a half an hour for the coroner to get down there and take the body. The associates who saw it still have flashbacks about it. One day, a woman stole a bottle of perfume and took it to the bathroom. She poured it out into her own container and then proceeded to fill the container with her own urine. She then took the bottle up to the returns and tried to return it. To this day, I have no idea why my manager gave her the refund. It was very obvious that the woman urinated in the bottle because it was still warm. A woman steals perfume, returns her own urine, and profits from Walmart. You know, it takes a type of crazy to actually be prepared to do stuff like that. Is that in her agenda? Is that in her calendar, yes, today is going to be a wonderful day as I'm just going to steal some delectable perfume from Walmart and then just return it for an extra few bucks with my equally as valuable urine. That's a whole nother level of crazy. I warn you, and I warn myself, we are never going to go to Walmart late at night. Just no. Someone left a baby in a stroller just chilling in one of the aisles one night. I was a cashier at the time, so I don't know all of the details, But from what I know, authorities got involved and the guy came back after what we think was at least an hour or two, appearing oblivious to what he did wrong. I don't think he spoke much English, so it was just a confusing situation all around. Thank God for the guy stalking who was looking out. We're lucky it didn't get any worse knowing how crazy people who come through can be, let alone at night. What's weird was this wasn't even brought up again with my coworkers, so I don't recall what ended up happening to the guy. It was just another stupid thing we witnessed. The whole don't call 911 thing was standard also at Target. I worked in the deli and our gloves to clean the slicer went missing one day. They are reinforced to help in case your finger makes contact with the blade, so the blade won't slice through your finger. Well, I told my manager we needed gloves and kept reminding her every day I worked, but she would just reply with, "I've let the e-tail know." One day I'm cleaning the slicer, it's taken apart so it can't open any wider than the locked and closed position. But there's an open spot at the top where the sharpener goes. Anyway, I'm cleaning it and my finger catches the blade right on the tip and it gets cut off. I felt a sting, thought it was minor, and went to the sink. I take off my latex gloves and start rinsing and I see my fingertip is gone, just flat and pouring blood. So I wrapped it in my pure white deli coat and walk out to the deli in the front. I showed the leader on deck for the night and she freaks out, pulls me into the break room and then has somebody take me to the hospital. Some people suggested she call an ambulance after about 20 minutes of me standing at the sink bleeding. Then she pulled in a guy who was shopping that was a part-time firefighter and he took one look and said, "I should have been at the hospital 30 minutes ago." Crazy. This guy comes in on a busy day and I start ringing him up for all kinds of stuff from around the store, including the newly released PS2 and GameCube. Yeah, I worked there a lifetime ago. He writes a check and I proceed to process it in our little machine. It comes back with a suspicious error, so I tell him the machine is acting weird and outside of earshot, I call a manager over. He starts getting visibly nervous as a few CSMs, cashier managers, come over and inspect the check. They ask him a few questions and take the check and disappear, stating they need to run it on a different register and that there's nothing to worry about and they'll be right back. After a few minutes, he is sweating bullets and eventually starts slowly making his way out of electronics. His pace quickens until he's full on running for the door. I watch him from the register cause frick it, I'm not breaking a sweat for minimum wage, and bam! Our huge security guy tackles him to the ground, picks him up, and escorts him up front. At this point, I tell a coworker to take over the register, and I head up front to see what else happens. I just had a feeling. I get there to see the guy meet up with the CSMs that took the check, a handful of managers, and a few police. They present the check to him, ask where he got it, and before anyone could react, he lunges forward, grabs the check, and eats it. Dude ate the check. They wrestle with the guy a little and bring him into the back room. Customers and staff alike were staring in disbelief at what had just occurred. I found out later that the guy was traveling from Walmart to Walmart across state borders, passing bogus checks. So, yeah, normal stuff.
Police officers of Reddit, what's the weirdest thing you've caught teenagers or kids doing that is illegal but you found hilarious? I feel like a cop has a story about me and two other people. Here it goes. I was 20 at the time and was at an outdoor party with a lot of friends. Late fall, 50 degrees or so, no leaves left on the trees, roughly 50 to 60 people, mostly underage, and we were wasted. My friend's parents lived in a nice part of a bad area and owned an inflatable bounce house business. They had everything set up. A bounce house, sumo suits, massive slides, all sorts of fun stuff. Around 10:30, it's getting loud and the police show up. Someone yells, "Cops, run!" and everyone starts running. I decide to join the crowd and end up hiding in a bush with two other people. Then reality hits. I'm wearing a white hoodie, the guy next to me has a neon yellow hoodie, and the girl had a freaking glow necklace on. The bush? No freaking leaves on it. Right then, the cops walk up and starts laughing and asks, "Really, guys?" and shines the flashlight directly on us. He instructs us to head back to the driveway with the other captives and gives all of us a pretty hilarious speech. Seriously, we are the Flint Police Department. We have a million things better to do than chase down a bunch of wasted minors. We were just coming by to tell you to keep the noise down. Now we were pouring out all of your drinks and calling your parents. Now we're even. I kinda had a similar experience once when I was young and foolish. A large group of underage kids were at a party one night, and then we decided to go grab some food. I was quite wasted and having difficulty walking on my own, so a couple of friends were holding me up. After a while, a couple of cop cars pulled into the street that we were walking down and all of my friends scrambled. One of the guys holding me up grabs my open bottle of booze out of my hand before running off. So I am left standing on my own in the middle of the street, very obviously wasted. And the cop comes up to me, asks if I had been drinking, and I tell him yes at a party. They ask me if I have any booze on me and tell them yes, I do in my backpack. The cop just says, "Thanks for being honest. We knew about your party, and it all seemed under control there, and you guys can drink at a private place, but you can't be drinking in public. You're gonna have to pour out that drink that you have in your backpack where I can see it. Then you need to go and find your buddy who took that open bottle off you and tell him that you owe him one, because you would be in serious trouble if we found you with that open bottle. Now have a good night, and don't get into any more trouble." Then he just walks back to the car with the other guys and drives off. Took me about 20 minutes to find my friends and tell them what happened. One of them just starts laughing out loud, saying that he was hiding in a bush nearby and watched the whole thing go down, and thought I was about to get super busted. I only ever went to one party where the cops showed up. It felt like a rite of passage to run away when they showed up. Wouldn't do that today though. Had a cop search my backpack once and found a couple of drinks and a box of pee-pee balloons. I was with my friends at the time, so he was like, "Why are there 3 drinks, a box of pee-pee balloons, and only 2 dudes?" I was speechless. "To be fair, officer, now there's 3. Raunchy music intensifies." My brother was a cop who worked nights in Minneapolis. One snowy night near the U of M campus, he noticed a car weaving, so he pulled them over thinking there would be booze involved. Nope, it was a car full of deaf people having an argument which included the driver. He just told the driver not to sign and drive. Dude, that for sure is a real thing, and it's scary stuff. I have hearing impaired friends that are horrible drivers, and of course they leave the dome light on in the car to be able to communicate at night, which doesn't help the cause. I mean, I understand it must be boring to drive and not be able to listen to music, but man, that's so scary when they're trying to sign with somebody in the back seat. I've taken a couple of sign language courses in my day, and I never thought about doing signs while driving. I can totally see how that could be really scary. Not a cop, but I do have a radio scanner. Dispatcher. Reports of a teenager riding a skateboard unclothed down Westway. Cop. Is the suspect carrying a suspicious package? Yes, sir. His package appears to be fluorescent green. I'd say that's pretty suspicious. My brother is a cop, and he told me that one time he got a call at 9:30 in the morning for a suspicious person sitting in their car in our neighborhood. My bro goes up to him and asks him what he's doing. Dude is waiting for his wife to leave for work so he can go back home to play WoW all day instead of go to his own job. My bro tells him to go wait somewhere else because he's freaking out the neighbors. To clarify a few things, the guy was parked in a different neighborhood than his own because he was hiding from his wife until she left the house. So nobody knew him, and it's obviously suspicious to be idling your car in front of some random house in a neighborhood while kids are going to school. It's not illegal, but he took the good advice to go wait somewhere else, preferably more public like a Walmart parking lot or something. Also, the dude was scared as hell that the cops were going to tell his wife that he was hiding from her because he wanted to go back home and play video games. My brother, of course, doesn't give 2 craps about that. He just wants the dude to go somewhere else so people would stop calling about it and causing him needless work. I'm not sure who's weirder here, the guy who's got nothing better to do than poorly hide from his wife so he can go play video games all day, or the neighbors who have nothing better to do than look out the window all day. Hey now, I will say, if you have ever had your car broken into or have had something stolen from your house, everyone becomes suspicious after that. So I can't hate on the neighborhood watch types too much, but they shouldn't be calling the cops. My friend had a bunch of prop arms and legs in his car, college. He and his other friend were trespassing in the Northfield tunnels, Google it. And then they get back to their car where a cop is waiting. He asked to see what's in the trunk, so they open it. He jumps back a sec and quickly realizes the arms and legs are fake and he hasn't caught some type of serial killer. Then he gives them a very stern, shut the hell up, look as he calls his partner from the car to come look at this. All shaky voiced, as he tells my friend and his friend to put their hands up, hella serious. The other cop comes over, looks in the trunk and freaks the freak out, screams and runs away back to the cop car. At which point the first cop busts out laughing and tells my friend, he was in Vietnam. And then he does the get out of here gesture and sends them on their way. So basically he used my friends to pull a super cruel practical joke on his partner. I had a friend who was a barber, so he always had those creepy mannequin heads in his car and all over his house. You know, the kind that they use to practice cutting hair. Well, one night he was getting pulled over for a minor traffic violation. License and registration, I'm gonna ask you to get out of your car and put your hands behind your head. So he cuffs my buddy and sits him down on the curb and then searches the car. And he pulls a mannequin head out of the back seat and he's like, oh, thank God. Why do you have this in your car? My buddy explains that he's going to barber school and they practice on those things. So then he and the cop, both super stressed out at this point, sit on the curb and share a cigarette. We got a call about kids, probably 11 or 12 years old, jumping across backyards. They were looking for something to steal, I guess. We searched for them for about 15 minutes. Just as I was starting to get bored with it, I hear laughing coming from a drain pipe. It's about 4 feet tall. My mate and I decide to head in. About 30 meters down the tunnel, I can see this kid bent over on all fours, pants down around his ankles. His mate is bent over, sitting on his back while the first kid's exposing his rear end. There is a third kid kneeling next to the first kid's full moon holding a lighter. They were in the midst of doing Blue Angels, aka lighting farts in a dark tunnel. I had no freaking clue what to say. We told them to come out of the drain with us. I advised them not to tell any of their friends what they were doing in that tunnel because they would probably get the wrong reputation. And I ended up driving them within a block of one of the kids' houses so the parents didn't see that they got caught. Come out with your pants up! I was a cop in the Air Force. We had just gone into a higher threat level, and around 11 at night, I saw 3 people in an empty dark field near some power lines with shovels and a garden hoe. My partner and I decided to stop them and see what was going on, because it didn't look like civil engineering or anyone that should be out there around that hour. So we go up and see that they're about 14 or 15 years old and they're all sweating and out of breath. We asked them what they're digging for and they all say that they weren't digging, which after looking around we didn't see any dug up dirt. So my partner asked what they're doing and they hesitantly answer that they were LARPing. One of their dads shows up and scolds them, telling them how shady they look, apologizing to us, and we send them all back to the dad's house, which was about 100 yards away. I hold back my laughter until I get back to the car, where I have to explain to my partner what LARPing is and why I'm laughing. Imagine your LARPing skills being so good that the cops get called on you. My brother was once jumping his bike off the end of a public boat dock behind the city hall, which also housed our police station. They had it tethered so it wouldn't get lost on the bottom. A cop came out and watched for a while and said, "I'm fairly certain something about that is illegal, but I can't figure out what it is and that looks like fun, so be safe," and walked back inside. There weren't a lot of local kids, but they all knew that we had no issue if they wanted to stop by and do some jumps, as long as they reeled the bike in and cleared the mud off afterwards. One day a bunch of us were taking turns doing jumps and basically just messing around at the lake, when this cottage kid from down the road rides up on his brand new, very expensively tricked out BMX bike. He parks up on the road a few hundred feet away from us watching, then sees his chance and just freaking hurdles his way down the ramp. A couple people try to wave him off, but this kid just goes for it, nails it at a blistering fast speed and flies 3 or 4 times faster than any of us could ever go with the tether. He pops out of the lake waving his fist in the air, shouting and carrying on like he just stole an Oscar from Leo. He swims back to shore and everyone is just staring at him while he carries on. Eventually, one of the girls just says, "Dude, was that a new bike?" The kid's face just kind of crumpled up in defeat. We all chipped in and tried to find the bike, but our lake is flooded farmland and the bottom is 6 or 7 feet of quicksand like mud. We dove, we drudged, we poked with paddles, nothing. Kid got in so much trouble. I don't think his parents ever bought him another bike. My friend and I were skateboarding around in front of a coffee shop. Big scary security guard came over, grabbed a skateboard, rode it around the parking lot, did an ollie and a kickflip, and then gave it back and left. We're talking 350 pounds, probably 35 to 40-year-old man. Our jaws were on the floor. It's always nice to hear cool cop stories instead of the awful ones you hear on the news nowadays. A few years ago, a friend and I were walking home through a residential estate, wasted after a night out. About halfway home, a police car pulls up next to us and says that they need to talk to us. They said that the CCTV in the area had observed us entering several front gardens. Since we were wasted, we tried to explain that we had been going into people's gardens and swapping around flower pots, hanging baskets and garden ornaments with their next door neighbors. One of the cops was laughing a lot and the other seemed really confused. Luckily, they got another call and just let us carry on our way. I got a call about 2 kids, maybe teenagers, smoking herb in their parked truck down by the duck pond. You know the one. Anyways, I contacted them and they were very respectful and insisted on filming me on their cell phones while I spoke to them. I told them I wasn't interested in their herb, still illegal in my state, but I wanted to make sure they got home safe, that the driver was sober enough to operate the vehicle. I did a basic field sobriety test on the driver and determined he was good to drive, all while his buddy was filming every movement and interaction. So I decided to have a little fun. By the end of the evaluation, I had the very nervous driver doing the YMCA, sprinkler move, and a janky version of the robot before he finally realized what was happening. His buddy filming realized right away. His defensive lawyer cameraman posture dissolved into a wasted kid that was now having a good time again. The driver broke down and busted up laughing before shaking my hand and hopping in his truck. The cameraman gave me a fist bump and just said, "Thank you," in a way that I took as, wow, good to know some of you are human. It's annoying that we have to live with this stigma that gets portrayed by popular media, and quite frankly, some of us deserve it, but it's still nice to know when you get through to someone. I mean, really alter their perception and break down a barrier put up by others. Cops are here to make sure people don't hurt one another. That's it. If you're going to hurt someone else, even if it's just a strong possibility, I'm your worst enemy. But if you're just swaying from societal norms that change like the weather and being yourself, have at it, man. You only live once. Okay, time to get off my soapbox. I didn't catch them, but when I arrived at my first station after graduating from the academy, I was talking to some of the guys who had been there a while. I asked if they knew my cousin, who lived in the patrol area. Turns out they did. They had a call a few years back of some kids driving around, pulling up next to cars at traffic lights and waving a huge pleasure stick at the drivers, laughing hysterically then driving off. They were pulled over, brought down to the station, and parents were notified. There was one old-timer who was a bit of a jerk, telling me that my cousin was a pervert, as were his friends. But the other guys said that they thought it was hilarious when it happened, and they never charged the kids with anything. I still mess with my cousin about this every time I see him. I'm pretty sure the Second Amendment protects the rights to pleasure sticks. When I was a teen living in the Phoenix area, we would fill up the back of a pickup with shaved ice from behind the ice rink and then build snowmen in people's yards. We would do it at night before ringing the doorbell and driving away. One time, a neighbor called the cops after hearing a couple of teens sneaking around outside. The cop came by and found out what we were doing. Instead of getting after us, he told us to follow him somewhere. We ended up making a snowman in his own front yard. He rang the doorbell and hid around the corner while his wife and their kids came outside. There are some good cops out there. Not all of them are like the ones you see shooting people without cause. Not a cop, but I was a soldier in the Army National Guard after 9/11. This informs the rest of my story. We were tasked with securing our armories immediately after 9/11 in case anyone decided to attack a soft target. This involves 24/7 armed security by soldiers with M16s in camouflage and body armor. This was immediately after the attacks, and for those who weren't old enough to remember it, stuff was weird at that time. Well, me and several fellow soldiers were guarding our couple-acre compound in the middle of a small city. Adjacent to this compound was a park with baseball fields that teenagers would go to, hook up, and party. Well, a blacked out car pulled down the road one night and my buddy was conducting a roving patrol that night, complete with night vision goggles. Well, they weren't in our compound, but they were pretty suspicious, so we called local law enforcement. By this time, I had met my fellow soldier out back to keep an eye on them. 4 cop cars come screaming down this entrance and draw their weapons. These kids were terrified. When they found out the cops were called, they asked who called. The cops shined their lights over at us and there stood 3 soldiers in camouflage with helmets, tactical vests, night vision goggles, and M16 staring back at them. We never saw that car again. I can only imagine the stories that they tell their friends. They were released and as far as I know, no charges were brought against them. I'm pretty sure when those kids talk about that story, they end up saying, "It was just like COD, bro." One of my friends from a couple of semesters ago was a cop a few cities over. He was a cool guy and we worked on our first class presentation together. Anyways, I'm sitting in my car before our class at 7 p.m. and I decided I'm going to smoke before class. This class was required, but almost insultingly easy. I usually walk around the parking lot with my J, but security guards were doing their rounds. And while they have a reputation of being pretty laid back, I didn't want to take a chance. So I'm in my car lighting up and casually reading my textbook. It's getting kinda smoky in my car, so I look around and then I crack a window to let the smoke out. Then when I saw security was gone, I rolled the window all the way down, ashed my J, and put it back in my mouth and got back to reading. Then out of the corner of my left eye, I see a cop car coming my way. It passed behind me and I didn't think anything of it because at this point I was already zoned out. When I realized that the J was still in my mouth, I got one of those sharp pains of terror that starts in your chest and shoots all the way up to your head. And your wasted brain is like, "Freak, we're freaked up, man." I started looking around for the cop car and I didn't see it. Then I looked out my passenger window and was like, "Man, thank God my windows are tinted." It was at this moment that I noticed my driver's side window wasn't as dark as it usually is. My brain is thinking, maybe it has to do with the placement of the light? Maybe it's because I'm closer to it? Is it because oh freak, it's because I left it open? After that realization, I saw headlights again and I just knew it was the cop car. Sure enough, the berries come on and over the speaker I hear, "Show me your hands." I do as he says and I show him my hands. "Open the door from the outside and step outside of the vehicle." So I do just that. "Hands, hands, I want to see them." Oh Christ almighty, they think I'm a dealer or something, and I can't even explain myself. I'm so freaking zoned out right now. "Put your hands on the roof of the vehicle and take 1 step back." Crap, I can do this. "Don't move those goddamn hands." Oh man, oh man, oh man. "Now twerk." What? "Twerk." Wait, did he just tell me to twerk? What the freak? I turn around and look at the cop car and then I just hear, "Twerk, twerk, twerk, hands on the car and twerk, twerk, twerk." At this point, I'm not sure what to do or think. The officer gets out of his car and it's the dude from my class. He said he saw me smoking up in my car and wanted to mess with me. I don't know how to explain what it felt like going to class after that. Hey now, I think it's fair game for cops to mess with you if they catch you doing something illegal. I think getting embarrassed is better than getting arrested. I rolled up on a group of kids trespassing on a patch of land at night. They didn't know they were technically breaking the law because there was no signage when they came in. I planned to tell them that they needed to leave, but one of them took me aside and told me that they were taking an out-of-town friend on a snipe hunt as a much-deserved act of revenge. I couldn't resist and I joined in. Winks and nods were exchanged. I called my shift on a radio back channel and the snipe hunter was called front and center. I informed him that the snipe is an endangered species and that the act of hunting one was a felony punishable by 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. All of his conspirators denied snipe hunting, saying that they were just stargazing and didn't know the guy that was doing the hunting. He was just standing there, wide-eyed, and literally holding a bag of snipe stick in his other hand. He stuttered and stammered an excuse, and insisted the conspirators were lying. About that time, 3 more cruisers appeared, lights and all, as if choreographed. We all stepped aside and the sheriff himself made an entrance and assessed the whole situation. Dead silence. After he made the inquiries, we all busted out laughing. The whole otherwise very slow night was captured in a group photo, complete with the victim, his friends, my shift, and the sheriff. Man, this must have been hilarious. I wish I met some cops like that when I was younger. The only one I met threatened to take my friend to jail because he had a license plate on his bike that we found in a ditch. Then the cop banned all of us from skating on one of the largest streets in my city, when we didn't really do anything. It's interactions like that that make some people dislike cops, in my opinion.
Middle school teachers, what is the cringiest thing you've seen a student do? Director of Technology here. I don't really have much to do with the kids at the school I work at, but I definitely have a cringy moment. Called down to the middle school from my office to debug a problem for a teacher. The classrooms in this building all have 2 doors. One door opens into the building hallways, the other opens to the outside. My office is across a field from the middle school, so I decide to just cut across the field and enter the side door to the classroom instead of going all the way around the field and entering the classroom from the hallway. Bear in mind that these outside doors are almost never used by anyone except for an occasional fire drill. I open the door and step in to see a room full of students facing away from me and towards their teacher. The student closest to me scrambles to click X on her browser, but not before I see full-on, hardcore yaoi hentai. Did I mention I work at a Christian private school? She turns bright red, and with visibly trembling hands, she closes her laptop lid. I burst out laughing, which interrupted the class. The teacher looks to me in questioning confusion, and the students stare in silence. I casually walked over her and said, loudly enough for the classroom to hear, "Let's not look at memes and Facebook jokes at school, guys." Her flush-red face, contorted with fear, suddenly relaxed. Her trembling hands stilled. I laughed again and went and debugged the wireless access point issue I was called down for. No point getting her expelled over hormonal changes and curiosity. Valentine's Day, and a boy brings a girl a dozen roses. They were both in my homeroom, so I watched this all go down right in front of me. I had literally never seen these two have a conversation before either. Girl didn't know what to do with roses at 7 a.m., so she threw the roses in the trash can literally 20 seconds after it happened and went on her merry way. The boy never found out. We had this one kid in our 8th grade class stick his entire hand in a cake that was being passed around for a party, grab a chunk, and started eating it like a Neanderthal. It was chocolate and his face was covered. When he finished his chunk of cake with everyone looking in disgust, he then proceeded to lick every finger. It was torture watching. He also ended up being the kid that threatened to blow up the school at the end of the year. Oh my god. I had a kid carve his own name in his desk, but he couldn't figure out how we caught him. Strange, isn't it? Around the 8th grade dance season, they call it prom, there was a whole lot of cringiness roaming the halls. One popular tactic among the boys was explained to me. We ask the girl to prom, and then we run away so she can't say no. I caught the student on Google search attempting to look me up. He spelled my name wrong, and my name is very common, so I wasn't worried. I sent him home since it was an after-school homework club, and then went through the rest of the history, which included boobs, naked women, Megan Fox nudes, and Megan Fox panties. One of the other students in the class kinda picked up on what was happening and mentioned that he has also been kicked out of the public library for similar reasons. A more innocent story, I was fixing the little girl next door's laptop. She shouldn't have a laptop, and her grandmother doesn't monitor anything she does because she doesn't know computers. I decided to peek in her computer history since she was 7 or 8 at the time. I was curious what kids her age did on the computer. Most of it was super spammy sites, but then I found a collection of how to prank call and what is Miley Cyrus's phone number? I was amused. There was always this kid that would go up to guys, shake their hands, and deeply sniff their necks. One day a teacher asked why he did this to guys, and all he said was, "If I did it to girls, it'd be weird." I once offered a boy a My Little Pony color by number sheet, ran out of Super Mario. The boy's response, "Mister, I'm not gay. I'm a lesbian. I like girls." I mean, to his credit, he's not wrong, but he is incorrect. I was demonstrating convection, which included burning some newspaper. One kid piped up with, that smells like incest." He meant incense. They were too young to get it, but I nearly died trying not to laugh. My husband teaches English at a middle school. He brought some creative writing assignments home to grade, and since I'm an assistant teacher for much younger humans, kindergarten, he drafted me into helping him sort through the mess and grade them. We've made good progress through the stack when I pick up a paper that had a kiss mark near the name in lipstick. Okay, that's odd, but I'm used to working with kids who are only just figuring out bathroom habits. A little lipstick on a report is hardly weird in my book, plus middle school. Then I see the name. Hun, who is R? Husband without missing a beat. R is this goth kid who looks like a rainbow threw up on him after having marathon screwing with a unicorn. I look back at the kiss mark. Glitter lipstick. Nice shade choice if the kid is going for goth pale. I read his creative writing assignment. I get up halfway through to go pour myself some more wine. It's an extremely well-written gay story featuring my husband and another teacher at the school. This kid is going places. I don't know what those places are, but he's going places. I had a student who would constantly butt into people's conversations, and when they asked him to mind his own business, he'd stand up and proclaim, "Nobody likes me! Everyone thinks I'm so annoying! Ha ha!" And he'd laugh while everyone awkwardly stared at him. Another kid literally told me one time that he would just act annoying so that he could impress a certain group of boys. They were not impressed. Well, at least that first kid is honest with himself. I had a 6th grader lick a book. He definitely tried to keep it on the DL, so he looked around, made sure no one was looking in his direction, and then licked the book. It was a tongue poke, then a full-out lick up the spine of the book. I had a classmate who had to give a presentation using PowerPoint. So there's a computer hooked up to a projector that is pointed at the screen that fills the wall. This guy sticks his USB with his presentation in the computer and it automatically loads the images he had on it in a gallery. He had a folder full of pictures of girls from his class he had downloaded from Facebook. That was kinda awkward. My mom is a middle school English teacher. Once, a student snuck a bar of soap into her class, ate it, and proceeded to run out of the classroom and start vomiting. Apparently, he did it to impress his friends. One of the kids responded to questions like Pikachu. Shame that a good kid is going to look back on those days with absolute horror. Not a student in particular, but a whole bunch of them. I was a substitute teacher for a few years on my university breaks, but last January was the worst middle school day I've ever had. 8th grade science class. I asked the kids to open their textbooks and work on the assignment. A girl shyly raises her hand and says, "Miss, there's something inappropriate in my book." Of course, some kid drew a member. I calmly tell her to erase it and move on. 3 more kids say the same thing. I say, "If you have something inappropriate in your book, please just erase it." Every kid starts whining about how there's members in their books. Since they won't shut up about it, I take the offending books and replace them with different books from the back of the room. Every single book had a huge member drawn in it. All 90-something of them. Crudely drawn members, artistic members, Squidward screwing SpongeBob, you name it, it was there. The kids rioted, I almost quit. I taught 4th grade last year, and I had a student who was 12 years old, middle school age, held back a few years. She always did very odd things to try to impress her classmates, but they were relatively tame. Until there was a line in the bathroom and she took her pants off, squatted over the trash can and peed. 4 or 5 girls came running out of the bathroom and told on her. I once confiscated what I first thought was a note being passed in class, but turned out to be a gay fanfic one of my students wrote, pairing 2 of her classmates. Had an 8th grade girl pretend to pass out because she was upset. She got written up for screaming that another girl was a freaking jerk in the middle of a science lesson. Then got upset when that other girl didn't also get in trouble for looking at her wrong. In the dean's office, she was so quote-unquote upset that she pretended to faint, complete with back of the palm to the forehead and dramatic exhale, and then laid on the floor until we were forced to call an ambulance. Before the ambulance came, Mom walked in, she worked right across the street, and said, "Dang it, Jennifer, we're not doing this again." So evidently this was a regular happening around their house. At this point, the girl squinted her eyes open but refused to actually get up. When the squad got there, they checked her vitals and basically knew she was fine. They had to take her because we can't take chances with this stuff in schools. We all just kind of looked at each other and shrugged. So yeah, that was cringy. I will relay a short story that my 7th grade bio teacher told us. In that class, we dissected a cow eyeball. The year before us, a student pocketed the lens of the eye. Looks like a yellowish hard thing about the size of a peanut M&M. In his next class, he stood up and swallowed it in front of everyone. Another teacher told me about a student he had who would come to school in different costumes, ninja, soldier, etc., and stay in character the whole day. I do not remember the details, but there was an incident in which he threw throwing stars during a talent show. In 6th grade science class, our teacher asked if anyone knew what the arms of an octopus were called, and this kid immediately raised his hand and blurted out, "Testicles!" Everyone was laughing, including the teacher, who also snorted. His face was so red. Kid wore clothes to school with the price tag sticking out. When asked why, I was informed that this was to let everyone know he was wearing new clothes. I thought this was going to end with the kid having stolen them. I work for a private school. At this point, that's really all you have to say. This middle schooler recently started dating another one. The girl decided to come to school in a black leather miniskirt and black leather tank top combo. At recess, which I watched because it's a small school, she was dancing all around in front of her boyfriend and hanging off the fence a la stripper. It was hilarious and so cringy. One student wanted to ask me if I had a doppelganger. What he actually said was, "Do you have a dingleberry?" I also had a girl ask me what food stamps were, which isn't surprising because the district is very affluent. I explained, but she still seemed confused, so she asked what it means to, quote, blow a trucker for food stamps. Evidently, she was reading a book meant for a more mature audience, and her worldly knowledge hadn't caught up to her reading level yet. I organized an activity that was sort of like Never Have I Ever, but positive and meant to build empathy. Basically, a student would say, "You're in my boat if," And whenever they say that is the same as you, you have to stand up and find another chair. Great activity. One of the girls, who I often found puzzling because she just did and said things that were nonsensical, started her period and got blood all over multiple chairs. Some kids start looking at the seats and have no idea what's going on. The girls in the class figure it out but don't say anything. They just avoid said tainted chairs. The boys, however, are as dumb as a box of rocks and are touching it and sitting in the seats. I'm sitting there horrified since 1, that's disgusting, 2, I didn't initially know who was pulling a carry, and 3, how the heck do I nonchalantly stop the activity to get this biohazard cleaned up and no one really notices? After a short observation of the students, I noticed that the one girl was the unfortunate cause of all this. I told her that she was to do a favor for me, and I stepped outside. I asked her if she knew that she started her period, and she said yes. I sent her to the office and then went back in the room for damage control. I honestly don't know how I concocted a magical excuse, but I told all the kids that we were invited to go to the library for silent reading time, but had to go now because all the good squishy seats would be taken if they didn't hustle. They believed me and I sent them down there. A few girls stayed behind that figured out what happened, and I told them I knew and sent them as well. I finally got on the phone and informed the unfortunate janitor about the bloodbath in my room. This student spent an entire semester speaking in a Russian accent for an experiment. No one questioned him. First day back from winter break, he is back to talking normal. We were all incredibly confused, and his parents ended up going to the superintendent about our school allowing bullying. I teach history and let my students do a PowerPoint presentation on the history of anything. Some kid did the history of furries. He came to class wearing his fursuit. Honestly, kids got guts. I respect him for that. I teach 8th grade. The student had talked to me previously in private about how the girl he liked was in my class the same period he was. He said that they had almost dated when they were both at their previous school before transferring to the one where I teach. On top of that, all the other students were aware that he had a major crush on this girl. So one day, he finished his classwork early and apparently he just couldn't take the hormones raging inside of him anymore. He blurts out, loud enough for everyone in class to hear, "Look, girl's name, are you gonna date me or what?" I pretend to work through this while cringing so hard on the inside. I see every other student in the room work through this, from shock to laughter to pure amazement and curiosity as to both why he would choose this moment and what on earth her response would be. The girl very politely said, "I'm just not looking for a relationship right now. Thanks for asking, though." Had a kid who legitimately believed he was a Sith, like from Star Wars. His helicopter mom would come flying down to the school crying religious discrimination if you told him otherwise. He would relax his throat and talk in a deep voice and say it was his real voice, but he disguised his voice to not scare his human brethren. On free dress days, he'd wear an all-denim outfit with high waters and denim vest over a denim shirt. I had him for science, so he blurted out things about alchemy from an anime he was into whenever we were working with the periodic table. He also had a girlfriend who lived in Mexico who was also his cousin. Humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain, something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange. Not a teacher, but in 7th grade biology we dissected rats, and the teacher warned that they might be juicy from preservatives. So I grabbed my dead rat, turned it over in the air, and shouted, "You gotta squeeze the pudding out of it!" My lab mate fainted as brown juices poured onto the table. I am now an adult biologist who does not do quite the same stuff. Scratch their butt with a ruler inside their pants and then put the ruler back into the container of rulers. Not a teacher, but I interned with one recently. Apart from the kid who insisted on being called Frisk, Undertale I guess, but the craze had died down so it was just weird. There was one girl who wore a cat ear headband. Kinda cute since they were the metal silhouette type that kids wear, but she paired it with a freaking cattail. A big, black and white, furry cattail. Not a teacher, but when I was in school, those track pants with snaps down the side were popular. The boys would try to yank the pants off each other during class changes, and they all wore basketball shorts underneath. One day, some guy thought it would be funny to rip off a girl's track pants. However, she didn't have shorts on. Bright purple undies on show, and the look of terror on that boy's face was hilarious. She just ran off, and a friend followed with her pants. Just finished my first year of teaching middle school. I had one particular student who did not view me as an authority and refused to work in my class. This was especially concerning because this student was placed in an advanced class and chose not to learn purely because of who the teacher was. This also meant that the student's classmates were well-behaved, gifted students. One day, while the whole class was completing an assignment, this student was not working. When I addressed the issue, the student threw a fit and started crawling around on the floor underneath the other students' desks. Now, I don't know when you've last been in a middle school classroom, but the floor is absolutely filthy. This student thoroughly embarrassed themselves, as was evident by the looks received from the other students. The whole situation was extremely awkward for everyone, especially when the student realized that they would get no support from the other students. Kid in a fedora offering high fives in the hallway, but then dabbing just before the other person's hand made contact. It was supposed to be a prank for a vlog. I had a couple of Markiplier fangirls a couple of years ago that just gave me the heebie-jeebies. A group of about 20 kids that run up and down the hall shouting about memes. One of which, when asked what he did over the weekend, started with, "So do you know the insert obscure meme?" While making Earth Day posters, one kid tried to disguise pot leaves as palm trees. There were several I love trees on it. Earth Day was on 4/22, so he also wrote the first 2 with a swirl at the end so that it looked like he'd written 420, but it just looked like 4202. I probably should keep a list, but they happen so often that I don't think I'd ever be able to keep up with it. One of my mother's students took a whole pizza in the box out of her office and just started eating. When told to stop and put it back, he licked the rest of the pizza and asked if he could have it. She said no and told him to throw it away. He started arguing that it was better in his stomach than in the trash. My mom was furious. Not a teacher, but I had a classmate on a field trip rub mud all over his clothes and body so he could go home. Turns out his mom's car broke down and she couldn't pick him up. He had to wear his muddy clothes for the rest of the trip. My friend and I got busted on day 1 of 8th grade social studies passing a crude drawing of a classmate of ours getting pleasured by 2 well-endowed men wearing party hats. I didn't think the teacher looked at it until I got summoned to the office during next period. The principal unfolded the drawing and says to us, "Can you boys explain to me what this is?" I knew I was screwed. My friend reaches over the desk and grabs it, holds it close to his face like he's scrutinizing it, and says to the principal, "It looks like a picture of classmate being pleasured with 2 large men, and I think they're wearing party hats." I freaking lost it. My friend got expelled midway through that year for threatening to kill the principal during math class. What is it with these stories and taking such wild turns? I swear! Why can't middle schoolers just be normal for 5 minutes? Not a teacher, but an illiterate girl was doing a presentation on the country of Nigeria. Yeah, I think you guys can guess how she pronounced it. Not a teacher, sorry to be that person. In middle school, my friends and I were not in the popular crowd, but one of my friends had a huge crush on the most popular boy in school, who was also a major jerk. So one day, she brought him a bouquet of flowers and a heart-shaped box of chocolates. She brought the gift to him before school where he and his crappy friends hung out and asked him to be her boyfriend. I happened to be nearby and witnessed the whole thing. They laughed and laughed at her until she ran away crying. Despite riding the same bus as her, I never saw her again that school year. I saw her that summer since she lived nearby, and she told me she transferred schools because of the incident. Poor girl was brave enough to give it a shot, just to be literally laughed out of the school. I taught 5th grade recorder class as part of general music, so every kid had to play them for a quarter. It was freaking awful. 15 to 20 kids, half of whom were budding criminals, playing out of tune on plastic recorders. I was in the middle of chewing them out yet again, when I heard what sounded like a sneeze combined with a squeak. I look over, and the dumpiest, runkiest boy in the class, the gross kid, if you will, had sneezed with this recorder in his mouth and proceeded to blow clear snot through it and onto his fingers. He sat there for like 15 seconds dumbfounded, with that orange clear plastic recorder just hanging out of his mouth. Finally, I told him to just put it on the table. A few minutes later, I accidentally knocked it on the floor, and it broke, justifying my throwing it away after class. I bought a new one at the 99-cent store because I was not giving that stupid thing to anyone else. Not a teacher, but was a student. One of my classmates had a history presentation. He screamed at the top of his lungs, "Leroy Jenkins!" Nobody had any freaking clue what that meant. Everyone was staring at him while he was just smiling, scanning the room, and slowly started to realize no one knew what he said. His smile quickly went away, and he began his presentation. 2 8th grade boys invented their own language which involved anime-like giggling. Funny thing, these 2 were jocks with decent social status. We had so many parent meetings about how their son's giggling was disruptive in class. The parents were mortified, but the boys wouldn't stop. I was showing a movie once, and this girl and boy were sitting in the back next to each other in a table where 2 people could sit. Anyways, by the middle of the movie, I see the kid has his 2 hands on the table and he is looking away with his eyes wide open while the girl has her hands under the table and is slightly moving. I knew right there and then she was rubbing him. I went discreetly and stood behind them just to confirm, and yes, she was. When I tapped her on the shoulder, I guess it was the adrenaline, he finished, in her hands. The 2 students in front of them saw everything happen. They were news for about 2 weeks and the entire school knew. They're in high school now and still dating. A rare happy ending for this. I'm a male teacher. I once confiscated a note being passed between 6th grade girls. It turned out it was a list, and they ranked all the boys in the grade in terms of attractiveness. I didn't really look at it, but later I showed it to my team, and they pointed out that my name was number 4 on the list. When I was in middle school, we had this dress as an animal day, and all the other kids did stuff like wear a raccoon hat or cat ears, but I was different. I decided to go in a skin-tight How to Tame Your Dragon costume, and the worst part about it was that the yearbook committee dedicated an entire freaking page to me in that crappy costume. I was a volunteer lifeguard at a middle school gym for part of the year. This school also has a swimming month in the gym classes, where students must wear bathing suits bought or ordered via financial aid at the uniform store. There was a highly overweight girl in one of the classes, and she didn't seem to be aware of the standard issue bathing suits. The gym teacher sent home reminders the week before, but I guess she forgot. This girl was picked on a lot in general and always kept to herself. She was very shy. She never spoke. If you called on her to answer a question in front of the class, she would get teary. On the first day, the other students showed up wearing the uniform bathing suits, but she was wearing her bathing suit from home. It also wasn't a particularly pretty bathing suit, as it looked very old ladyish and had a bright orange Hawaiian shirt type of pattern. She stuck out, which you could see in her body language really bothered her. The gym teacher ended up calling her out in front of the whole class, giving her a lecture, and giving her a detention for not wearing her uniform, because that was the rule. Her face turned bright red, and she just stood there silently while other kids stared at her and giggled. You could tell that she wanted to cry, and that her soul had just crumbled. The lecture went on for a very long time. This was a gym teacher who didn't like it when the students disobeyed the rules. I was sitting off to the side, wringing my hands and bouncing my knee in secondhand embarrassment. I wish she had just read the reminder. Poor sweet child. Always read the reminders.
What was the worst time you walked in on someone?
I was living with my grandparents when I was about 19 years old, and I came home early one day from work. I walked into the bathroom and saw my grandfather, who was like 80 at the time, butt naked, staring at himself in the mirror. He was smiling and shaking around his schlong. After we both made eye contact, we both said, "Oh crap," and just turned around. I'll never forget that image in my head as long as I live.
Traumatizing, but not that bad. When I was 8, I walked in on my dad banging my mom's best friend in my bed. She was babysitting and he was supposed to be at work. They were loud and I went to see what the noise was. My dad screamed at me to go away, so I got out of there without actually seeing them. I told my mom when she got home, and she ended up spending the night in jail for breaking her best friend's nose. When she got home, she beat the crap out of my dad with a baseball bat. Wasn't the first or last time he cheated on her either. I got an awesome new Princess Jasmine bedding set out of it though. I just want to go on record that infidelity and abuse are a big no-no, and this kind of behavior really messed me up mentally growing up. OPS for the worst, so I gave it and tried to be entertaining about it. And yes, the sheets were to replace the ones my dad banged on. I still stand by my statement that Princess Jasmine is awesome. Well, that's a twofer right there. First you walk in on your father cheating on your mother, and then the spousal abuse? That's pretty bad.
I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 guys, so it was 2 guys per room. I usually left first because of my job. One day I realized I'd forgotten some important documents and came back to get them. I opened up the door to my room and found my roommate laying naked on his bed, legs up in the air and blow-drying his balls. He later explained to me that he had some sort of jock itch and needed to keep that area moisture-free. That image is burned into my brain to this day, and on his birthday, every year, I send him a picture of a blow-dryer.
Look, itches in tender places are just hell. I don't blame the dude, but lock the door, put a note up or something. Demoisturizing balls. Knock, please.
So I'm out tent camping in a state park. It's early morning, maybe 6-ish. I need the restroom down the path. I grab my shaving kit, start walking the 500 yards. About halfway, I hear a noise and look to my left. Directly into the eyes of a dude hammering away at his girl doggy style inside their tent with the door open. I pause, kinda shocked. Dude waves at me. I wave back. Girl looks up. She waves. I wave back. They continue banging. I continue walking.
I guess they just really wanted to be fully in touch with nature. Like if they're leaving the tent door open and everything, they wanted to be seen.
I, 25F, was being towed around a house I was planning to rent a room in from Craigslist by the owner. The last bedroom door was closed, so he knocked and opened the door to reveal a husky man with headphones on, aggressively beating off. I still rented the room.
I'm reminded of that meme where Hank Hill walks into the room. I freaking love King of the Hill, by the way. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I thought this was a... Oh, good Lord!"
I didn't personally walk in, but my mom did. I was told to stay outside. I was about 15 and me and my best friend along with my mom went shopping and we came home to see my brother's girlfriend's car parked in our driveway. So me and my friends were all like, oh, you know what they're doing, and my mom was brushing us off. She told us to wait outside and went into the house and quickly came out covering her eyes repeating, I saw nothing. She caught my brother and his girlfriend mid-act in the living room. My mom was mortified and me and my friend were thrilled we were right.
Doesn't matter how traumatized the mom is from seeing her little boy being a man, it just matters that you were right.
A walking in story from a party I was at when we were all about 17 to 18. A couple of hours in, everyone had turned up except one of the birthday girl's best friends. She eventually calls and says she's out at a club and can she bring the guy she's met, whose name is apparently Sketch. Half an hour later, they turn up pretty drunk. After about 15 minutes, we realize they have vanished upstairs. Birthday girl doesn't really want them fooling around in her bed, but no one wants to walk in on them either. So we send the drunkest guy up to call them down. He toddles off upstairs and then about a minute later comes back into the living room looking pale and distraught. He sits down. We ask what happened.
I went upstairs and opened the door, and he was going down on her. And then he looked over at me, and I think he was a vampire.
There was blood all over his mouth, so I left. Turned out they started fooling around and it became clear it was her time of the month, but Sketch decided to power on through. We accidentally sent up the one person who in a drunken haze was not mentally equipped to deal with this at all. He looked broken for the rest of the night.
Can't say I blame the guy, that probably would have kind of ruined my night as well.
So, this happened last semester, but I got home around 11:30 p.m. and no one was home. I'm like, alright, whatever. I go to my room, throw my stuff down and grab my water bottle. I walk into the kitchen to fill it where the front door is, small 3 BDRM apartment through the school. And in walks this girl. I'm like, what the hell is this girl doing in my house? We make eye contact. I realize it's my roommate in full drag. Fake boobs, wig, high heels, all of it. All he says is,
I can explain.
already having seen a lot of this kid's oddities, I just say, don't bother, you do you, man. And I just went to fill my bottle and continue to play Civ or something the rest of the night. He now occasionally just chills in drag and talks makeup and clothes with my other roommate's girlfriend. I'm riding this sitting next to this 7-foot unicycle propped against the wall. It's been an interesting year to say the least. Disgusting, utterly debaucherous. I cannot abide by a 7-foot goddamn unicycle. 4 foot is the max that a unicycle should be. You'll break your goddamn neck riding that thing. It's just impractical.
TLDR, I'm probably in a smut video online titled RA Interrupts Gay Threesome. What happens next you won't believe. I used to be a resident assistant. I was doing room inspections with my partner, RA. I had given all my residents over a week notice, taped a letter to their door alerting them that I would be coming around. Everything was going fine until we got to room 312. I still remember the room number to this day. We knocked on the door 3 times with no answer. I announced that I was keying into the dorm. We get inside. Everything's normal. I go to the individual bedrooms and knock 3 times again. As soon as I announce I'm keying in, my residents open the door in just gym shorts. Hey, what's up? Live Legacy? Just doing our scheduled room checks? Oh, okay, come on in, without even hesitating or giving me a warning on what I was about to walk into. As he opens the door, I see a naked man dart across the room and into the bathroom. I didn't know he was gay, so that was surprising. But then I walk into the room and look to my left. I see a tiny Asian man was standing in the corner with a laptop in front of him. He was only wearing a cheetah print thong. I quickly avert my eyes and look to my right, and I see a camera on a tripod. I dart out of there, immediately yelling, "You passed! Have a nice day!" They could have had kilos of booger sugar in the corner and I wouldn't have cared.
How on earth did this one not get gold? This one was hilarious.
Didn't really walk in, but the most traumatizing time. When I was 6, I had friends over for a play date, and I went to go hide underneath my grandparents' bed with my friends. My grandparents came into the room after us, so they had no idea we were in there, so they started undressing and went on the bed. Sound started. I started crying, but they were basically deaf, so they couldn't hear me. But my mom walked by the room and thought she heard me crying, so she walks in. Grandparents start screaming at my mom. Mom starts screaming at my grandparents. I run out from under the bed with my friends trailing behind me. It was awful.
That is basically the exact same thing that happened in an episode of F is for Family, which is a hilarious show. Another, not walked in, but my parents divorced when I was a baby. I ended up living with my dad and got very sporadic visits from my mom in my hometown of hers. I lived half the country away from her. One summer, in the first few days of a visit to her town, I thought I was alone in the house. I was 15. My siblings were several years younger than me and out playing with their friends, and my stepdad and mom, I thought, were at work. It's hot outside, my stepdad is a tightwad, so there was no AC in the house. I decided I was going to go upstairs and soak in a cool bath for a bit. Since I think I'm alone, I start shedding clothes as I'm going upstairs instead of waiting to get into the bathroom. As soon as I reach the top of the stairs, my mom jumps out wearing nothing but a lacy thong and yells, "Surprise!" Turns out my stepdad was supposed to be home early that day, and since I had only been there a couple of days, she assumed the heavy footsteps coming up the stairs were his. So there was a very surprised, almost naked 15-year-old looking at a very surprised, naked 32-year-old who also happened to be his mom. We talked about it one time several weeks later just so she could explain, and it hasn't been mentioned since. For you weirdos, no arms were broken, I was repulsed, not aroused, and I guess you would have to ask her many partners over the last 4 decades if she was hot. I'm not mad at y'all though, this is what makes Reddit worth my time. It's like a double KO in a fighting game, only with trauma.
Double trauma. I was 12 at a sleepover with a good friend of mine. It was around mid-afternoon. I was getting myself some water when I come back to see my friend getting lectured about how messy his room was. It was immaculate, and how he should take responsibility for things. He did. His dad is pulling up carpet fuzz and yelling at him for it. My friend is crying. I kind of pretend that I didn't walk in on that and hung out in the kitchen reading cereal box ingredients. As soon as the dad walks out, his girlfriend comes in through the door in tears. She had totaled her Corvette running a red light, and now the boyfriend was hysterical, yelling at her and us. They go to their room and there's this banging and fighting noise. Then everything was normal. Took me bloody forever to realize they were addicted to booger sugar. The dad and the girlfriend sound like absolute tosspots. That's all I have to say on that, really.
I went on a road trip with my family when I was like 13 or so. We stopped overnight at a motel and my mom asked me to fill the ice bucket with ice from the machine down the hall. I grabbed the bucket and went off to fill it up. When I got back, I had the terrible realization that I didn't remember what our room number was. Starting to panic, figured the only thing to do was to pick a door at random and hope for the best. I picked a door. It was the wrong door. An old man answered wearing nothing but tighty whities, a wife beater, and black dress socks. Behind him, 2 other similarly clad gentlemen sat on the bed next to 3 old ladies in negligee. I asked them where the ice machine was, even though I already had ice in the bucket that I was holding in my hands. He pointed down the hall and I said, "Thank you," and took off. I guess my mom heard me and opened the door to wave me back in. I was only off by a few doors. Worst episode of Showcase Showdown ever.
And then you have to sit there and wonder what they're doing a few doors down from you the entire time. Awful. Technically, I didn't walk in on this situation, but bear with me. Something I liked to do when I was very young was bring shoes into the different rooms of the house. I was always very proud of myself and wanted to show everyone that I brought more shoes indoors. Once, I had the brilliant idea to hide in my parents' closet with a pair of shoes so I could surprise them with my ingenuity of now hiding shoes in their closet. I made this, what I thought to be at the time, a very well thought out and super professionally planned scheme. Step 1 of my plan was to set into motion my getting the shoes and bringing them into the room with me undetected. This proved to be an easy success. Step 2 was supposed to go a little something along the lines of show them the shoes once they came into the room, etc., etc. That is where my plan goes all wrong. There I was, sitting in the closet waiting for my parents to re-enter their room, when I finally heard the door open. Just as I got my stuff together and was ready to leap from my hiding place and bombard my parents with shoes, I froze. I heard my mum moaning and stopped in my tracks, not knowing what I was supposed to do. Now my plan had been disrupted. So I peeked from the crack in the door of the closet to see what was happening and saw my parents getting it on. I didn't know what to do and knew that it would be more awkward for me to open the door and leave than just sit and wait for it to be over. So, logically, I sat and waited. When my parents left the room, I waited a bit before leaving the room myself and pretended it never happened. This specific individual sounds more like they're a dog with the ability to use a keyboard with a Reddit account. Probably late to the party, but I'll post anyways. I was the one walked in on. In high school, I snuck out of the house late at night to meet some friends. And let's just say I was very hungry when I got home. So I raided the kitchen pantry and took the only two edible things that were ready to eat: plain tortilla chips and plain Hershey's chocolate bars. I go up to my room and start eating the chocolate and chips. Mind you, I sleep naked and it was a little warm in the house, so I'm naked on top of all the blankets, and with the state of mind I was in, I was making a pretty big mess. Crumbs and chocolate bits getting all over my chest. Well, then I pass out. Here comes the problem. I have always been hard to wake up. We're talking now I have to set 12 alarms every morning for work. So every morning my parents, Mom until this incident, would come to my room, open my door, turn on my light, say time to get up, and close the door. Turning on the light was the only way to get me out of bed. So, my poor mother comes to my room to wake 17-year-old me up, and as a 17-year-old boy who is just waking up, I was fully erect. Doors open, lights flip on, and there is her son laying like a dead starfish on his bed, chips, crumbs, and melted chocolate all over his chest with a raging boner. Not only that, but from her angle, she is staring right down the devil's alley at my taint, balls, and boner. So she screams at the top of her lungs. This scares the crap out of me, so I wake up and start screaming at the top of my lungs. Now she's kind of running in place, flapping her arms around, screaming. I'm screaming naked in horror in my bed, and my dad comes bounding over thinking something is wrong and bursts the door fully open. He yells, "Oh, what the hell?" I try to yell, "Get out!" and cover myself, but really just manage to yell, "Grrr!" as I rip the blanket up and fall off the bed to the side. Breakfast was quiet that morning. I'm going to use the Devil's Alley in the future. That was funny as hell.
I would just like to preface I was 5 years old. I was at a campground and headed over to a friend's camper to wake her up in the AM. I walked up to the loft area and shouted her name. Turns out she was in the room to the left, not the right. Her cousin shot up out of bed, staring right at me like my holler was a fire alarm. This wouldn't be worse until you consider she had a glass eye that apparently drifted inwards while she slept. I had no idea who this woman was or what was up with her eye, but I screamed, "No!" the second she opened her eyes. I ran 90 miles per hour that morning back to my place. The worst part was my naive reaction, clearly.
I know a swath of very different people, but I've never met anyone with a glass eye personally. Yet. Or as far as I know. Not sure if this belongs here, but it's a nice departure from all the 18+ related stories already posted in the comments, so here goes anyway. This happened in 2005. I was 21 years old and working my first full-time job during university vacation. One day, my boss allowed me to go home early, so I raced home excited and looking forward to an afternoon enjoying the epic summer weather. I parked my car in our garage, and as I walked through the two interleading doors into the kitchen, I suddenly heard the sound of footsteps running down our passage away from me towards the 3 bedrooms. I knew my 19-year-old sister was home, so I just assumed that what I'd heard was the sound of one of the many female friends she regularly had over. She was a total socialite, running away from me. I figured maybe said friend had been slightly undressed or something. I don't know. I didn't have much time to think because what happened next happened really fast. A few steps later, and I'm in the dining room from which the rest of the house fans out in 3 different directions. Then I see my parents' bedroom door at the end of the passage open up, and my sister sticks her head out and screams at me, "You mad though? Get out, there are 2 guys in the house." As she says that, she slams the door closed again. And then, sure enough, 2 black guys appear from one of the bedrooms off the passage. They're both slightly younger, maybe 19 years old and much skinnier than me. Bizarrely, my first instinct was to negotiate with them to get them to leave. I think the reason for this was that both looked as surprised to see me as I was them, and it was clear that they hadn't planned for this, so I think I figured, well, now that they'd been caught, they'd readily leave. My only thought was to get them out of the house. At this point, I still didn't know what my sister's condition was, whether she'd been hurt or anything. On my way there, I'm also trying to figure out how I'm going to open the door to let them out because I've left my house key in the kitchen where I came in, and there's no key nearby to open the locked steel security gate. Before I get the chance to even make a plan as I reach the entrance hall, suddenly both guys jump on me and stop me from going any further. I grab onto the door frame for dear life, and right about now I notice that one of them is armed with a huge knife from our kitchen. Oh crap, I think. I'm about to feel what it's like to get stabbed, but by some miracle he doesn't stab me. Now I'm screaming for help louder than I've screamed in my entire existence, hoping that I'll be loud enough for someone to hear outside the house and bring help. And in the meantime, these 2 guys are trying harder and harder to pull me off the door door frame. My shirt tears in half and I sprain 3 fingers from the strain of holding onto that damn frame. Then a moment of clarity. I remember that there's a panic button linked to our armed response company right outside my parents' bedroom. I scream my sister, press the panic button, and I hope she hears me because I'm all out of ideas and all out of hope. Then I hear her shout the last thing I wanted to hear. I can't. I'm tied up. The panic button is mounted at like shoulder height on the wall. In that moment, the most dire sense of panic and fear sets in. People say about scary moments that I nearly shat myself, and suddenly I almost understand what that means. I can feel my butthole puckering uncontrollably while I wonder what the hell is going to happen to me now that nobody is coming for help. Just as I'm giving up hope, the house alarm starts wailing. It is loud, so loud it physically hurts my ears, and the siren is mounted in the ceiling right above me and these 2 thugs, so it is super uncomfortable. I scream at the thugs that the police are coming. I notice that they looked almost as afraid as I am. They let go of me and run down the passage. Turns out they left via my bedroom window. I later learned that following my scream for her to press the panic button, my sister was somehow able to sort of shimmy her way up the wall from a prone position to where she could reach the panic button. I also learned that frighteningly, thanks to recent home renovations, the wire in the room next door linking the alarm system to the phone line had been cut. So although the alarm went off, nobody was coming to help. Fortunately, the 2 thugs didn't know that. This whole episode must have taken no longer than maybe 2 minutes tops, but it felt like it went on for a half hour. Anyway, seconds later, there's a knock on the door. It's my friend Bruce popping over for a visit, and I'm still in such shock at that point that I can barely think straight enough to let him in. But I did, and it's lucky he was there as he went to find my sister and untied her. Fortunately, she was unharmed, although she was convinced that the 2 had planned to grape her and that the only thing that prevented it was my early arrival home. We immediately called the cops, who arrived very quickly along with a volunteer trauma counselor, our armed response guy, and an armada of the other security companies and agencies in the area. They are all linked to the same radio network and all assist each other very effectively. In spite of the police's genuinely best efforts, by then it was too late and unfortunately the 2 thugs were never caught. On the plus side, my folks immediately bought a new house in a much safer suburb far from that one, and within a few months we were out of that hellhole of a suburb. And also it forced me to take stock of my personal safety, so now I'm far more aware and I'm far more prepared should anything like that ever happen again. God forbid. I'm sure a lot of people are thinking the same thing right now. I want to hit the gym so goddamn hard right now. It's these kind of situations that you need to be prepared for. And having a home invader, 2 home invaders, is probably absolutely terrifying, especially when you've got family that you don't know what their condition is. Like, I can completely understand why this dude's mind just went completely blank, why he reacted the way he did. I know I'd go absolutely berserk if there was a stranger in my house, stealing my stuff, trying to hurt my family. I don't frickin' know. But then again, in the UK, you're not actually allowed to defend yourself, it seems, from people who are trying to commit violent acts against you because our laws are, well, I can't use that word, but I'll say stupid, and you can think about what I actually wanted to say. Anyway, try and stay sharp, be ready for people who try to mess you about, hurt you, whatever. Hit the gym a little bit, do a bloody boxing class or something. I did frickin' Jeet Kune Do, and frankly, this has put me in a foul mood all of a sudden.
What was your best "you have no power here" moment? When I realized I could just hang up on my sister when she wanted to yell at me on the phone. As a 12-year-old, that was a powerful moment. My sister is 6 years older than me, so after she was 18 and out of the house, she realized she could talk to me any way she wanted, and if I wanted to say something back, she would run to our parents. Fast forward 6 years, her and my parents took me out to eat for my 18th birthday, and she caught an attitude and I cussed her out. She gets the fish look on her face and looks at my parents, at which my mom laughs, shrugs, and says, "He's an adult now and he's tired of your crap." This is funny. Me and my brother did not get along that much when we were younger, but the moment he moved out, we got a lot closer. Sometimes you just don't make good roommates with people. I worked at Domino's and there was this old lady who ordered from us a lot and was always unpleasant. One day she calls and makes an order she must make a lot because she knew exactly how much it was supposed to cost down to the penny. I put in her order and tell her how much it is, and she starts getting upset because the order is 2 cents more than what she usually pays, and starts accusing me of trying to steal money from her. She asks, "How much money do you make stealing 2 cents from every customer?" Well, if I was trying to steal money and I did it to 100 customers, I would have made a whole $2. I didn't know what to do because she wouldn't accept the order and it was exactly how much she thought it would be. and there's nothing I can do to remove 2 cents from an order, so I asked the manager and she just tells me to hang up. I was new at the time, and I'm guessing that this wasn't the first time the store got screwed over by this woman. It felt amazing, and that was the only time I had to deal with that customer. I used to work at a call center, and I loved hanging up on terrible customers. I once worked for a shady company that sold and repaired expensive American vacuum cleaners. I was the service manager. I had planned a 6-week scuba diving trip with a mate for 2 years. They were well aware of this and said it was fine. When the time came close, I put in my application for 6 weeks leave. I was called into the owner's office and was told that I could only take 3 weeks. I had saved up the time with their permission. I pointed this out, and they were adamant that 3 weeks was the most that they were prepared to authorize. I even tried to negotiate them to 5 weeks, but they firmly rejected it. So I walked away from the office, wrote my resignation letter, and left. Had a great holiday diving the Great Barrier Reef. They rang me up weekly for a solid 3 months, offering all sorts of incentives to come back. But by then, I had already won a great government job. Screw you, Tony and Ann. If the military ever taught me anything, it's to get everything in writing. That, hey sir, I'm taking leave for the 4th of July for 4 weeks, and his, yeah, sure, in passing in February means nothing unless you have it in some form of physical writing. Email, paperwork, or whatever you have, document everything. I agree with this statement. Always create a paper trail at your job. It will most likely save your butt in the future. My boss sold the company, and about a week after the official switch to the new owners, he called me up and asked me to do something. I told him my consulting fees were $120 an hour. He didn't take me up on it, unfortunately. When I left a job, I was invited to meet the CEO because he was unhappy I was leaving and wanted to understand why. I explained that I was not being paid enough and the recently announced pay raise was not good enough. He got irritated and in a patronizing tone started trying to lecture me on how I should have handled the situation better. I interrupted him. He didn't like that. So I added, I'm leaving. I have nothing to lose. And then informed him that I had already been let down over pay multiple times, had witnessed others trying to get more pay and being refused, so I had no interest in begging to be paid what I already deserved to be paid. At that company that I worked for, the managers just stopped giving exit interviews at all. It just became a big circus. Man, the only job I ever quit was also the only job that ever gave me an exit interview. I had nothing really to say, so I ended up just saying that the break room needed recycling bins. The interviewer was so confused. I had a friend who worked in the selling of online spicy content advertisements. He was making them millions a year via Cam and had all his clients up there spending. Repeatedly asked for a raise and they said that they couldn't afford it. He got another job that almost doubled his salary and then he showed them the offer and asked for $10K more than they were offering or he would go to the new firm with his clients. They cursed him out, told him that he was a traitor and said that there were more dignified ways to do this. In the end though, they gave him the wage he wanted. He asked for it in writing and then he forwarded it to the rival firm to negotiate the original offer. They matched the additional $10K and he bounced anyway with his clients and got his old jerk bosses to help him get another $10K of salary at his new job. Had a client freak out on us and harass us with cell phone calls every few minutes because we couldn't accommodate her needs. She wanted to make her countertops larger than the actual slab of granite. You can't grow rock. So we just refused her deposit and told her not to call us anymore. She was speechless. She was trying to get a discount and now she had to start the whole process elsewhere. We don't abide by the customer is always right. Firing the customer is definitely a thing. Sometimes 20% of your business requires 80% of the effort. Businesses that want to do better look hard at that 20%. I did wedding photography for a few years before every person on the planet had a digital camera. During a consultation, the fiance asked me if I had an umbrella insurance policy in case they were disappointed with the photos and wanted to sue me. He wasn't joking. He called me later to let me know that they decided to choose me as their photographer. I told him thanks, but no thanks, citing creative differences. Some people are idiots. Reminds me of a story back when I was in high school. One of our extended group of friends was a semi-annoying guy most of us tolerated. We'll call him Todd. Todd got into a car accident with one of our other friends and came out with a couple of cuts and bruises. No big deal. A couple of months later, we were all joking around in front of another friend's place and are about to hop into another friend's car. Todd decides that this is a good time to say, "Hey, make sure you guys don't get into an accident. I didn't want to sue the other friend at the time, but it was probably a mistake. Could have gotten a lot of money." Friend with the car's mom hears that from the porch and runs over to cuss Todd out and informs my friend that since she pays for the insurance on the car like a nice mom, Todd is banned from that vehicle, just in case because she doesn't want any bloody lawsuits. Everyone else in the friend group talks it over and agrees this is a sensible precaution. And that's the story of why Todd had to take the bus everywhere until he got his own car. Man, I think everyone's had a Todd in their friend group before. This was my last job, was hired to be doing PC repair, only to be told an hour before my first shift that there wasn't any hours available for that, and that they could put me elsewhere. Begrudgingly I accepted as I turned down another position and needed the work. Fast forward a few months and the manager decides I'm going to be filling in for the only person handling shipping and receiving for this giant department store, single-handedly with 3 days of training. So of course things aren't going well, as this is a 2-person position at minimum for 8 hours and I'm expected to do it in 6. The last day on the job, I'm swamped. Vendors are fighting with each other over the dock space and another manager comes up freaking out on me because I couldn't get the extra work done, and I told her repeatedly that I couldn't be done. Exasperated, I pleaded my case, to which she callously said, "I don't give a crap." Now I'm getting mad. She replied to me at this point and says, "Do you know who you're talking to?" I replied, "Yeah, the bee who now is running this poop show because I'm out." $11.35 an hour with my promised hours gutted was not worth it. I was hired to build a website. I knew basic HTML and was forced to apply. They wanted to pay me an hourly wage rather than actually getting a professional. In short, the site consisted of listing all the items they had for sale in pretty much a single table on the site, as they took old appliances, TVs, freezers, fridges, etc., and sold them to various third world countries. So I had to take the pictures of all the products to have the images on the sites. They give me a cheap camera that dies after every 2 pictures I take. Boss's wife and another random staff member are there. All they do is sit on their butts chatting and do no real work, leaving the actual work to the other staff. I point out that the camera is dead. They tell me that I'm lying. Suit yourself, I'll sit down and do nothing at all until the boss is back next week. The next day I'm told to do work, point out that the camera is still broken, and get told to take it back if I want to, but while I'm out of the office I'm not getting paid. So I stay sat down doing nothing. I will point out that the actual site was built in the first day. It was literally just a white page with their contact details on it and a list of the items and prices. Hardly some long drawn out thing that actually needed work. So the next day, guy comes in to look at the stock and buy some, and asked if we have a camera. I immediately offer him the one that was given and point out that it doesn't work, but if he can get it going, he's welcome to use it. Boss's wife states that it does in fact work and that I'm an idiot. Potential buyer looks it over for a few minutes, tells her rather bluntly that it doesn't work, and I grab my coat and tell her I'm done here as well. Boss did try calling me the week after to go back, but I had no intention of working in that office with her. Plus, what am I going to do once I've gotten the pictures anyways? I was hardly going to be kept on to take one picture every month or so. I would have probably stayed at that job if I was collecting a paycheck for doing nothing. My old job had so much downtime in between assignments that I started taking my laptop to work and editing my YouTube videos. I was able to put out so much content while still getting paid. I was working in retail and a customer walked up and asked if since the ATM was broken, if she could buy something then return it for cash. I had no clue, so I called over another employee who had been there for a while and they said no. Furious, she demanded to speak to our manager. We call over the supervisor of our section and he listened to her question and he said no. Furious, she demands his manager. He calls over the manager and she shows up. Surprising, the answer was no. Customer is red in the face and demands another manager. We call over another manager, wink wink. She asks again and he says no. When she said she wanted his manager, the owner said, "I'm the owner of this store. The answer is no. It's against company policy." She stormed out, surprisingly not asking for the CEO of the company. She didn't take no from 2 employees, 1 supervisor, 1 manager, or the owner. And Jesus freaking Christ, when you have 5 people of increasing power lined up telling you no, and there is a line of bored customers behind you, I think you need to stop. As someone who worked retail for many years, I will tell you people will complain as long as they can if they think they can get what they want. I had found another job and was just waiting it out to get my bonus. For about 3 months, I was free to express myself in ways I wouldn't have otherwise. I had noticed that my vacation time had not been approved, and normally I would have asked about it, but I decided to see how it might play out. My manager called me in about 2 weeks before my vacation to inform me that it was denied. I wasn't the least upset, but I informed her that I was going to take it anyways. She threatened me in every way under the sun, which only made me laugh at her. Everyone was surprised when I left her office smiling as they had heard her. I went to check my desk, printed off my resignation, and gave it to her. Got my bonus, got my vacation, and also got an extra 2 weeks paid because I was going to a competitor and they didn't want me sharing information. I did something similar. I handed in my 2 weeks notice at this one place as I had already got hired in another city, and I was going to move. The manager, who was just the worst human being spreading misery in a bag of skin, tried to tell me that it's my responsibility to find and train a replacement. And if she doesn't like them, then I'll have to stay until she finds someone she does like. I told her straight up, in 2 weeks, I'm gone. Or you can fire me right now. I don't care. I'm not spending 1 second of my time finding a replacement. That's your problem. It's not my fault you're such an insufferable thunder bee that no one wants this job. At that point, she was actually yelling at me. I could no longer use this place as a reference, like I could possibly give a crap. I can't use my last job as a reference either. I made a TikTok video of myself flipping off every camera in the building on my last day. I also hid a bunch of comedic stickers of myself all over the building for people to randomly find. Company did restructuring and laid off about 30 of us. My boss, picture female Limburg, gave me my contract package, which also included a lecture of if I was a better worker, the company wouldn't be doing this. After a month, they realized it was a mistake and told us that they were nullifying our contracts and that we could have our jobs back. I said that my attorney wasn't aware of a contract nullification given in the language in the document. And if they didn't want to stand by their commitment, we had already retained counsel, so whatever would happen, would happen. They came back and said we could have another 1-year package over and above salary if we stayed for a full year. I quit on the 366th day, and my boss told me that she was hurt and that this was very hard for her. I just called her a psychopath and walked out of the building. I was in a wedding party, and there was a brief lull in between scheduled parts, and we were all just milling around waiting. The bridesmaid, known for being obnoxiously bossy, starts barking out orders to every single person. As soon as she's finished, the wedding planner, who was standing right behind her, says, "Nobody do any of that," and then told us to sit tight. It was great. There's always that one person that tries to take charge when somebody else is already in charge. Got out of the Army and joined the Air Force National Guard in my home state. 20 minutes after leaving my new base for the first time, I receive a phone call from a guy introducing himself as a sergeant first class from the Army Reserve, informing me that his system shows my name had been pulled from the reserve pool to deploy to Iraq within 3 months, and he congratulated me. I kindly informed him that 1, I had just returned from deployment before getting out and was still guaranteed more than 3 months stateside, and 2, I had enlisted in the Air Guard and therefore exempt. He got irritated, raises his tone of voice, and said, "Well, you better get that paperwork to me ASAP because my system says you're going." I told him I signed a contract which binds me to that, not your system. It's not my job to update to ensure your system is up to date. I give him the name of the organization I was now affiliated with, the city, the state I was in, and my recruiter's name, rank, and personal phone number. Now you have several different ways to contact who you need in order to get your system updated, and I just hung up on him. Question? Did you join the Air National Guard in part to keep what tried to happen from happening? Was this pretty common for the Army to try to reel people back in? No and no. I switched because as part of the out-processing from active duty, you had to schedule an appointment with the National Guard rep. This particular guy touted $20,000 bonus for my job in this particular group announcement. But when I went in for my appointment just 4 days later, suddenly it was gone. I didn't like being taken for a fool. The Air National Guard offered said enlisting bonus plus a little less grueling lifestyle. Overwhelming majority of inactive reserves for the armed forces never get recalled unless there's some nationally known and televised escalation in fighting, such as Iraq in 07 or 08, or World War III breaks out suddenly and there's a huge demand for seasoned service members. Credit union tried to bill my father's estate for a card they wouldn't provide documentation for. I told them in detail why this wasn't going to happen. After my father passed away, there was a small amount of estate-related issues to take care of. I was the legal executor of his estate. While I was sorting through things, I started getting letters from a local credit union regarding a credit card account of his that they wanted paid off. Problem was, I could find no evidence on my end in all of my dad's paperwork of him having had that credit card. And though I knew he had a savings account with them, I didn't recall any prior bills from them regarding said credit card. And I had been handling his bills close to a year before his passing. I went in to ask for evidence and got told that only the CEO could handle the matter. She was on vacation that week, so I left my name and number to have her get back to me. When she finally got back to me, she didn't offer any evidence, but instead offered a number of demands that I immediately pay the money, and if there wasn't enough money in my dad's estate, I should sell the house that he owned for the alleged debt of $600. Pointing out that he had not, in fact, owned said house for quite some time by the time he died fell on deaf ears. The letters continued, some personally written and rather harassing in tone. I was feeling rather concerned as I didn't know exactly what they could do or what my options were. I know the smart thing would have been to retain an estate lawyer to handle it, but what do you do when you're not an attorney or don't have the money to retain one? I had been handling things myself as the most financially minded of my siblings, and trying to handle things as a matter of common sense and common decency. There wasn't a lot of assets or debts with the estate. It seems that it should have been pretty straightforward, and other than this case, all of it went smoothly. Fortunately, Oregon state laws are actually really easy to read for a layman. I spent several nights studying the various sections and determined exactly how things should go, and I wrote a letter, sent certified delivery with a return receipt, back to the credit union CEO. In the letter, I stated the following. First, that there is no evidence present for the claim. I was formally denying in my capacity as the executor, which the law allowed, with the window of opportunity of 30 days to appeal the decision in court. Second, that if she wished to make any appeal to me personally and save on the court fees, she needed to provide documentation of the account, including a record of all transactions and changes to justify the amount claimed. Naturally, I got a letter back 4 weeks later. It contained some paperwork, including the paperwork establishing my dad's savings account, but nothing establishing the credit card. Further, the letter stated that it would be too difficult to provide full records of all the transactions. Any bankers out there, take note, never tell a programmer that it's too difficult for you to access your own data. We know it's either BS or that you're admitting incompetence. This would have been a 5-minute database query for me, and that's if I had to look up the tables first. The letter reiterated the demand for immediate payment, again stating the house, which again, not actually my dad's, but she kept insisting it was, and said that it would need to be sold for payment. I wrote another letter. In this letter, I clarified several points for her. First, that as she had not provided the required documentation, she had not actually made an appeal that would be subject to evaluation, let alone acceptance. Therefore, the original denial of claim stood unchanged. Second, that it is not her place to determine my father's assets, as she is not the executor of state. Third, that even if her claim were to be granted, Oregon law requires 6 months from the descendant's passing to receive all claims before any of those claims may be paid out. And by demanding immediate payment, she was attempting to get me to break the law. Fourth, that Oregon law declares priority of claims by the nature of them, and credit card debts were ranked N, where the above included taxes, medical debts, and various other things. Even if her claim had been granted, she could not be paid unless there was money left after paying all the higher priority debts. And even if the house had been included, that wouldn't have been the case. And fifth, as the 1-month deadline for appealing in court would have expired by the time they received this letter, they had exhausted all of their legal options, and further attempt to pursue this claim would constitute unlawful harassment, and charges would be pressed in such an instance. I never heard back from her again. This was a massive W if I've ever seen one. Good on the OP, even though I didn't understand half of it.
Let's hear the other side. Guys of Reddit, what's the creepiest thing a girl has ever said to you? I remember one time this one girl who was oddly talkative in my options and fixed income class kept talking and asking me about my personal life. Then, when she added me as a Facebook friend, there was a message with it that said, "Found you, smiley face." Pretty uncomfortable. I was talking to a girl on the phone who at the time was messed up on painkillers and started relating to me a story about how when she was 7, she pushed a girl into a pool and watched her drown. Her grandma came home, found out about it, and told her to tell the police it was an accident. That should have been a warning sign right there. "I kept some of your hair," 20-year high school reunion. Copied from an email I received from a stalker 7 years ago. When you and her have your baby, rest assured, I'll be the one that raises it. Haha, no! When I was about 17 years old, I worked at a cafeteria and some girls, 11 and 13, were chasing me for weeks. They even waited in front of my door when I had to go to work to chase me all the way up there. One day I was working and the cafeteria was full with people when the 11-year-old girl said, "When can I give you head?" Everyone instantly looked at me. Uncomfortable isn't even the right word to describe my feelings at that moment. Ugh, I thought I had nothing to contribute until you reminded me. Back in middle school when I was maybe 13 or so, I used to go to a pretty large school, roughly grades 5 to 12, all in the same interconnected complex of buildings. That meant there was always a huge number of students milling around the place during lunch break, and since it was a quite large area, you were often surrounded by strangers. Anyway, at one point I heard through the grapevine, which, as a social outcast, was nothing I was terribly familiar with, that this girl a grade or two below me liked me. Being socially inept, I just checked if the girl was pretty, noticed she wasn't, and ignored the whole thing. Well, the girl didn't take being ignored for long. She got her cousin, who was more or less the bully of my grade, to pay me a visit with his cronies, pick me, and carry me to go see her one lunch period. They literally half-dragged, half-carried me across the whole school complex to see this girl and held me there while we talked. Imagine your worst early teen conversation where one party is shyly talking to her crush and the other is awkwardly trying to put her off, all while being physically restrained and watched by bullies. I suppose this doesn't really compare to the trauma of being propositioned by an 11-year-old when you're 17, but oh man was it awkward. Sadly, subsequent girls have been far less forward. Making out with the girl I was seeing, lightly slide my hand up her chest, and as my hand is going to caress her neck, she grabs it around her neck and forces me to choke her, which is fine. She then proceeded to call out her brother's name, which I assume was less fine. This happened to a friend of mine I was living with. I won't go into it, but the situation we were in demanded we shared a bunk bed. We had a rule that we could bring girls home so long as we kept the noise down. One night, while sleeping, my friend brings this girl home with him. I woke up to them coming in as they went up to his bunk to start messing around. I hear the typical stuff at first. Lip smacks, heavy breathing, some moaning. Then it happened. I hear the girl whisper to my friend the words, "Are you down with the funk?" In retrospect, my friend says he said yes because the chick was hot and he didn't want to ruin the night. So he says, "Yeah, baby, I'm down with the funk for sure." Almost immediately, the girl takes off her panties, stands up on the bunk, turns around, squats, and takes a dump. Right on his chest. Luckily for him, it wasn't the messy sort, but as you can imagine, the guy lost his crap. No pun intended. He tossed her off the bunk and started screaming for a girl to get the heck out of his house. Meanwhile, I'm on the bottom bunk laughing my butt off. So, not really the creepiest thing a woman's ever said, but now you know what the funk is. This has ruined my perception of funk music forever. I was over at her dorm room, and after we got done with our business, I spotted a bottle of my cologne on her desk. I asked her about it, and she said she sprayed it around to make her room smell like me. Okay. Next week, she gets into my car, makes a big sound, and says, "Oh, smells like you in here." She started rubbing herself. No joke. En route to Kroger. Okay. Few weeks later, at her dorm room, I decide to get a little nosy. I find the following. 1. Aforementioned bottle of cologne. 2. 2 pairs of my dirty undies, not left by me. 3. Pair of my dirty socks, again, not left by me. And this freaked me out more than anything for some reason. Number 4. Envelope with what I can only assume to be, drumroll, my body hair in it. Not okay. I break up with her over ICQ, the good old days. She informs me that she left a bag in my apartment. It's under my bed. In said bag is a bunch of completely random crap with Kmart tags still on it. It was obviously a plant meant to force us to have an awkward post-breakup makeup reunion. Nay, says I. Got my army buddy to drive me over to her dorm in his Ford Festiva. I saw her on the curb waiting, crying. I launched that bag out the window and we took off as fast as that Festiva would go. Never did see if the bag hit her, but given its trajectory, it's highly likely. For those who will want to know, the cologne I was wearing was Old Spice. I was dating a girl called Allison. My grandma is also called Allison. I had mentioned that I found it a little weird that they had the same name, so once as we were screwing, she asked, "Does this make you think of your grandma?" It didn't. Until then. I once went to a ski resort where people of different nationalities were there. A young Chinese girl introduced herself to me the day I was leaving and asked for my number, so I gave it to her. She called me about a week later and asked me if I wanted to go over to her place for a dinner party. I thought to myself, sure, why not? So I turn up with some booze and find about 24 young Chinese girls and no guys. None of the girls spoke any English except the girl who invited me. They sat me down at the end of the table, spoke in Chinese all night while looking in my direction, and giggled all the way through. I had no idea what they were saying. At the end of the night, the hostess asked me if I would be so kind to pose for individual photos with each one of them separately. I hesitated, but went along with it. They giggled hysterically throughout, and still only spoke Chinese. No idea what the heck that was all about, but I got seriously creeped out. Edit. No banging involved, those girls were young. I'm a regular guy. Only thing I can think of is they thought maybe I looked like someone famous, though I don't think I do. Okay, some people are making a big thing about the booze thing. In Australia, it's traditional to bring some wine when invited to a dinner party. Also here, the legal drinking age is 18. The girl I met was no younger than 18, I thought, so it was all cool. I was in my mid-20s then, so by young, I meant they were too young for me, though technically it would have been perfectly legal. I'm no predator, I just like girls to be around my age, but not younger by a huge margin. Also, the hostess told me none of them ever drank alcohol, which made me think that they were slightly on the innocent side. Unrelated, but I can't even read half of these because they're so messed up. For example, a girl I hadn't even dated carved my initials into her ankle. She received no wahoo. Had a girl request me to break into her apartment, make her hot chocolate in her kitchen while she's scared in her bedroom, and then come in and bang her. You know this was all just a ruse to get you to make her a hot chocolate, right? I had a girl I once kissed at a party proceed to send me pictures of her crying, half naked, and makeup smeared all over her face Joker style. She won't stop calling me or sending random pictures of herself with distressed or angry face. This has been going on for 3 months now. This is a toss-up between look at these before showing me hundreds of bits of paper the girl had written my name on over and over again when we'd been out once, or the time I woke up from a lovely wahoo dream to find my girlfriend gripping my member and asking me over and over again, "Who do you think I am?" Do you want all your stuff back? After we broke up, I had not given her anything. She had stolen it all over time. She had it couriered to me. We then ended up having pillow talk a few months later over email. I found out later that it was her sister mailing. And this stuff she sent back was a photo album entirely filled with pictures of me sleeping. Good times. I had to borrow a girl's computer once for a group project in college. I got to the group meeting and there was a password. I called her and after 10 minutes, she finally gave me the password, which was her first name and my last name. Okay, but low-key, that's kind of sweet.
Your lips looked dry while you were sleeping, so I licked them for you.
Wife and I were in town with our son, visiting my parents when an old high school friend, she was only ever a friend, came by to meet my wife and 2-year-old son. After we all sat and talked for a few hours, and what after felt like a pretty normal night of company, we all got up to say goodnight and the friend hugged my wife goodbye, then turned to me, grasped me very firmly into a hug, kissed me on the lips, then whispered into my ear, "Your son should have been ours. I love you." Then turned around like it was totally normal and waved goodbye to us and left. My wife didn't see or hear any of it, and I never told her. She thinks the girl is a decent person and will never see her again. I love you with all of my heart. Let's run away and get married. Not creepy yet? I was 12. She was 42. Not directly to me, but a friend of mine's mom referred to me as a tasty little snack when I was 15. And no, she was not a MILF. Not even close. I went to a football game with this girl. Afterwards, I went to meet her dad, which was already kind of weird. He said to her, "Is this the boy you've been talking about for the past 3 months?" I had known the girl for 4 days. So I did this chick that lived near me, only a few times over a few days. She got really attached to the point of freaky, so I backed off. Within a month, she was at a mental institution. 2 weeks after that, she gets back and happens to be sitting with her mom outside when I got home from work, so I could either ignore her completely or interact. I greeted them nicely and asked how she was, not mentioning where she just was. She stared at me for like a minute straight with the most blank, creepy face I've ever seen, and finally said something.
Are you the one that was controlling my mind?
Nope. I can poop bigger than you can, as she began dropping her pants. To be fair, we were only 3 or 4 years old at the time behind my parents' garage. And though I lost that contest, I married her years later and have since upped my game. I was literally almost inside of this girl and some intimate talk is going on, and she whispers, "You know why I've always liked you?" I asked why, and she said, "You remind me of my dad." I still banged her, but I didn't call her for a while after that. Girl I had slept with 2 times, without knowing her or her friends. We were neighbors. "My friends saw you at Bar X on Saturday. I thought you said you weren't going out." How did they know it was me? I never met any of your friends. They've seen pictures. Pictures of what? Of you sleeping. Did anybody else get reminded of that overly attached girlfriend meme from like 12 years ago, or was that just me? In a big group of people. "Could I have some vodka?" "You've had way too much." "I'll give you head for some vodka." "I'm good." I'll do it anyway. She told me she wanted to be the father of our children. Let that sink in for a bit. This one's a bit of a long one, and it's kind of gross, so just a fair warning. I'm 20. A pretty sort of rock and roll 24-year-old girl asks me out at the spring this past summer. I say yes. We have a decent date. She says she's leaving the next morning for New York City for a month's time. I figure this means she wants purely to use me for wahoo because she asked me to come over at 12:30 at night and has been out drinking with friends. I say yes. She comes over. We have fun. She was uncoordinated and spoke atrocities while we did this awfully clumsy mushing. The worst I've ever experienced, blame on her behalf. After, I expect her to believe because she's verbalized that she has a flight at 10 a.m., but no, she lingers. For hours. Until well past 5 a.m. I can't bring myself to hint that she should leave, so I go with it. Lying naked next to me, breaking a long silence of hours in which I've fallen asleep, she wakes me and says, "When I was 12 to 15 years old, demons would try and enter my spirit, my soul, late at night while I slept. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I know so." You can imagine the terror as my eyes grew wide and I grew rigid, staring at the ceiling above me in the blackened room. She continues, "They succeeded once, and I became possessed. I couldn't control myself. I started hurting myself and becoming intimately violent. Sometimes, I think they're coming back for me. I want you to hurt me so they can't." I had to kindly show her out after explaining that I was growing much too uncomfortable. The worst part, I wake up the next morning and expect the protection we had used, now lying on the floor, as I pick it up to trash it. Part of why our intimacy felt strange was that there was some texture I felt unfamiliar. Blood. Blood everywhere. It had just been overlooked the night prior due to my bedspread being all black. Man, the blood. So, a girl had a crush on me. One morning when I came home to my place, there was a bag hanging on my front door. I bring it inside and see what's in it. I find a new set of pencils. There was also a spoon that you used to feed babies along with a bottle of baby food. A tiny pink hair clip I'd imagine a 9-year-old girl might wear. A 3-page letter telling me the letter was written by a Polish girl who just moved into town. She called herself Tatiana Dongchert. I think it's Polish, I'm not entirely sure. And she wanted to meet new people in town. So she asked if I wished to bake Doppler cookies with her down by an abandoned warehouse at the docks. Yes, that is what she wrote. Then, as the letter progressed, the text looked more and more as if someone wrote it while driving a bike. At the end of the letter, it was more like random words. Later that same week, someone tried to open my door in the middle of the night. Then another week passes, and I get a visit at 5 in the morning from some staff from a home nearby where she apparently lived. They told me they found her sleeping in my bushes and that she had run away every night for the last 2 weeks and that she was very ill at the time. They gave me a number to call in case of an emergency. I did not sleep well that following month. Hold on, stop. That's my husband calling. The husband that she said she divorced from who was overseas in Iraq. She wanted me to wait in silence until after the phone call to get right back at it. Stood by the door the whole time, too, to make sure I didn't leave. Nope. Special Cambodian spice. It didn't sound creepy at the time, but I'd asked my wife of 25 years what the unusual black seasoning on the meal she'd just given me was. Turned out, it was a pharmaceutical in the class of beta blockers. By pure luck, I ate only maybe 1/10 the amount present rather than all of it. An hour later, I nearly died. Weak and intermittent heartbeat. A few months before she'd got me to take out life insurance. Beta blockers in more than tiny amounts stop the heart. Looks like a natural heart attack. She's Cambodian, by the way. Yeah, because I was really wondering about the veracity of your statement regarding her status as Cambodian when I'm more concerned about the fact she nearly killed you, dude! My first girlfriend, read-only girlfriend, found me packing my stuff to get the heck out and pulled a sword on me, like a real katana. Said if I packed another freaking thing, she would cut off my head and keep it in a jar. I very carefully explained that I was just moving things, all was well. I hugged the psycho, then left in the dead of night and spent the rest of the night at the train station till I could get the heck out of Dodge. For the next 6 months, she sent me nightly messages on various websites accusing me of being a demon and attacking her while she slept in the dream world, and I should be careful because she was going to fight back with witchcraft. Then, she recruited other crazies, and they were saying the same crap. There was this army of her and a bunch of underage girls, one of which was apparently my then 23-year-old ex-girlfriend's new true love, waging internet war on me for being an evil dream demon and trying to take over the dream world. Since then, yeah, pretty much double rainbow gay. Dudes aren't freaking insane, and when they are, you can tell pretty easily. I found half a bag of toenail clippings in her closet, and when I confronted her about it, she said, "Yeah, I like to save them for later when I want a midnight snack." I got the heck out of there, needless to say. Over at the apartment of some girl I knew from wherever, and basically there to just have wahoo, just going through the formalities of acting like we're not. She pulls out a photo album. First and ever page, a miscarried baby, dressed up in a bonnet on a silk pillow. I actually found it reassuring that the pictures weren't just thrown in with our other family photos. 4th of July at Uncle Ted's, Labor Day, dead baby, dead baby, dead baby, Thanksgiving, dead baby's first Halloween, Catwoman of course, Christmas after that crazy blizzard on Mount Hood, dead baby, ooh, ski trip. Ex-girlfriend of almost a year, who I thought had moved away, bombarded me at work one day and said, "Look what I did for you. Will you take me back now?" She had the Chinese characters for I love you and my initials tattooed on her arm. I would have to say when a girl I barely knew figured out my class schedule, she would leave me letters in sealed envelopes, giving them to my teachers to give to me. This one time, me and this girl who seemed interesting enough had a conversation. "If you'd have to kill me, how would you do it?" What? Do I really have to answer? "Yes, I need to know." "Well, I'd probably shoot you, something quick and painless." "Aw, why not just stab me into the stomach with a rusty knife?" "Abandon ship! Abandon all hope, ye who enter!" I had a girl open with a necrophilia joke. That's how far she got all night. Just a quick heads up, exploitation of minors in this one. This will probably get buried, but I knew a girl in high school that was pretty sought after. She was small, blonde, busty, and had a killer smile. She loved gaming, anime, sweet tea, boiled peanuts, the whole shebang. I never bothered flirting with her or anything because she just always had so many guys practically tripping over one another to talk to her or sit next to her at lunch. We had computer and geometry class together and sat right next to each other through assigned seating, so we got to talking here and there and had a lot of laughs. We started enjoying it so much that we started writing each other notes back and forth in class, then entire letters throughout the whole day. Then she started inviting me over to stay the night. Her parents were okay with it, and they never came to check on us or anything. I got the impression that I was not the first boy she brought home, so of course we had Wahoo, and I lost my virginity that night. Things are going smoothly over the next couple weeks, and she starts stepping it up on the kinky meter. First, she admits that she thinks threesomes are interesting. Okay. Then she says she likes furries. Alright. Then that she likes older and younger men. I don't even know what the heck that means, but this girl is letting me sleep with her on a regular basis, so I don't care. Then the letters she starts writing me in class get really graphic, asking questions like what would I do if my dad walked in on us doing it, and if he would join, or if I would come to her house after school and pee on her in her bathtub. At this point, I put a lot of space between us, and a couple of days later, she confesses to me that she cheated on me in a threesome with 2 older men. She was really broken up about it, but I saw it as a get-out-of-jail-free card. A year later, she starts dating a friend of mine who was only 15. Keep in mind, she was about 20. I warned him that she was a bit loose in the head, but being 15 and with the busty blonde, he didn't care either. Past time forward again, I go to hang out with them at his house. Turns out she's pregnant and they're hiding it as best they can. Things come to a head when his parents find out. Cops get called. They find pictures of them banging together, which was exploitation of a minor. So they raid her house. They find that her parents are drug dealers and an immense amount of CP on her computer, some that include herself when she was younger. Turns out, her mother used to make the videos of her sleeping with older men and would sell them. Needless to say, she's in jail now and there is an ongoing custody fight. TLDR, lost my virginity to a cheese pizza actress. Got stalked by a crazy. Followed our band around for a while, but I wasn't interested as I had my eye on someone else at the time. I was playing a gig at a pub, she walked in, took off her clothes in front of the stage, took a knife out of her handbag, declared her eternal love while touching herself, and threatened to kill any woman that went near me. I'd never spoken to her or anything else before. The police eventually took her away, but I was reminded of my grandfather's advice at the time. If you're gonna date a woman, date the one that irritates you the least and never, ever date crazy. Good advice, but what if you'd never spoken to her before or shown any interest? The woman had a history of mental issues stemming from a brutal childhood. She was committed to long-term care, and it turned out she had a thing for musicians, as other fellows I knew had the same experience with her at various venues. Stunning-looking woman, but not playing with the full deck at the time. I hope she's got herself sorted out since then. Not to me, but here's the deal. This happened not very long ago to a friend. He tried online dating, and some cute girl messaged him to hang out one night. Verified her, and she looked the real deal. Gets to her place, and she's dressed up to go clubbing with another friend of hers who's on the computer. As he walks in, her friend yells, "Oh my god, I got another one! We're at 6!" My friend raises an eyebrow but hangs out for a bit. They start chatting and drinking, all is good. And then, by surprise, like 4 other guys show up minutes apart. She walks to where they are and says, "We only need 2 more," or something like that. At this point, my friend is freaked out and asks what the heck is going on. Turns out these girls were deciding to invite all the tall guys on the site and then making them compete for their attention in person. Game show type environment. TLDR, some girls on a dating website invite a whole bunch of guys to their place and play "I only want the best, the rest can leave." Now that's creepy.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories, and if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.